Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto becomes Jinchurriki of Dragon Highschool DxD Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for Part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. The alarm blares, loud and persistent, but Issei Hayato is deeply asleep, sprawled across his bed. His room is a mess, with clothes thrown everywhere, and his school bag half packed. The morning sun peeks through the blinds, illuminating his peaceful, drooling face. Suddenly, there's a loud knock on the door. Miki Hayato, Issei! Wake up, you're going to be late for school. The door creaks open, and Miki pokes her head in, her expression both concerned and worried. Issei stirs, grumbling, and reaches out to snooze his alarm for the third time. In his half-asleep state, he knocks it off the nightstand, and it crashes to the floor, falling silent. Issei, 5 more minutes, I was fighting my nightmares all night. Miki rushes in, shaking him urgently. Miki, no, Issei. It's already past 7:30. You have to leave now. Issei's eyes snap open. He stares at his mom, blinking. Issei, wait, what? He sits up abruptly, glancing at the clock, and his heart drops. Issei, 7:30? Crap. I'm gonna be late. He scrambles out of bed, knocking over a pile of clothes in the process. With panicked energy, he dashes around his room, grabbing his uniform pants and shirt while hopping on one foot, struggling to put them on at the same time. Miki tries to help, handing him his shoes. Issei, why didn't anyone wake me up earlier? Miki, I was running late for work too, so I gave the babysitter the job to wake you up. But the babysitter Aram is still sleeping in her room, so go wake her up too. In a frenzy, Issei runs to the bathroom to brush his teeth and washes his face hastily, splashing water everywhere. He stares at his reflection, his hair a complete mess, but there's no time to fix it. He rushes out, grabbing his bag from the floor, which spills out books and papers everywhere. While Issei is in his morning rush, he starts to speak to us. Hi, my name is Issei Hayato. I am what you would call a below-average 6th grader. Am I a troubled kid? Maybe am I a kid who gets into fights with people because I get made fun for being half Japanese and half Greek from the father's side? Might be. Am I a kid who is perverted in nature and wants a harem full of big-breasted women? Absolutely. Issei, seriously? Just as Issei is about to bolt out the door, he bumps into Aram in the hallway. She's already dressed for school, looking perfectly calm. Issei, you are awake? How my mom said you were still sleeping. Aram, I have my ways, she heard Miki when she was screaming at Issei. Anyway, go get ready, I am driving you to school, I already packed your lunch. Aram is a white woman with red hair. She is also the first crush of Issei Hayato. Later, when Issei is leaving, he looks at his house one last time to see if his mom followed him and Aram to say goodbye. She didn't, as Issei scoffs and sits in the front seat of his car. Aram looks at him in a sad expression but then says, hey Issei, when you are out of school we can go and get ice cream. How does that sound? Issei excitedly says yes. Issei goes to a school called Akumo where troubled kids meet and can learn to be upstanding citizens of the society. That's the school where Issei met his 2 friends Matsuda and Motohama. With Issei they were called the Perverted Trio. As one of their members, it was Issei's job to bring a perverted magazine this time of the week. Seen Issei's school, where also Aram works as an algebra teacher. Issei, yo Matsuda and Motohama, how was the weekend? Matsuda, totally bore. My parents were home and found my dirty magazine. Man, I got the beating of my lifetime, haha. Motohama, of course they found it. You always hide it under your bed. The best place to hide a magazine is in the closet or in your bag. Motohama says while lifting his glasses. In the distance they can hear chattering a few girls saying it's Monday morning and the perverted trio is already started being perverted. Hearing that, Matsuda starts to tear up in one eye, but then he smiles and says, Issei, did you get it? Issei smirks and says we can look at it at lunch behind our tree, the secret spot. Third-person POV. Riku was the class bully in Akumo Middle School. When he set his sights on you, knowing your lunch money would be taken or worse, getting a bloody nose at the least, he has 2 lackeys called Goon 1 and Goon 2. Riku was, let's say, well fed for his age, and recently he had overheard 3 perverts talking about something they were going to do behind a tree at lunch, and of course, Riku being himself had to get involved. Riku told Goon 1 to keep a close watch on the perverted trio. Goon 1, being afraid of Riku, agreed immediately. Meanwhile, Goon 2 was said to skip his classes until lunch and hide near the tree. Goon 2 tried to protest while shaking because he was scared of Riku and missed his classes. The teachers weren't exactly kind to the students of this school. But later, Goon 2 gave in to Riku and hid near the tree in the playground. Issei's POV. Issei was looking at the blackboard while feeling extremely bored. He looked over at Matsuda, who had a note in his hand which he passed to Issei. Issei reads the note, and it says, "I can't wait for lunch break." Reading that, Issei chuckles under his breath while getting a bit excited, and then he hands that same note to Motohama while grinning. Third-person POV. Issei and his gang had sat behind a tree during lunch reading a dirty magazine that Issei had stolen from his neighbor. His neighbor was also a pervert. He had gotten Issei a special edition for his 13th birthday that was in 2 weeks before summer because he was going to be abroad. Issei didn't mind all that much. The only people who used to come to his birthday were Aram, Matsuda, Motohama and Irina, but well, she left for England now. His mother never showed up for his special events as she was always busy, but when she came home she would always argue with Issei, so he didn't mind it that much. Issei POV. Issei was looking over his most treasured magazine when he heard a familiar voice saying, well, looky here what we have, the perverted trio being perverted. Issei looks over where the voice came from, and to no one's surprise it was Riku, and he was followed by his goons. Issei saw Riku signal one of his goons to take the magazine away from them. As Goon 1 rushes to them, Issei, seeing that, shoves Goon 1 and starts to fight him. Third-person POV. Seeing Issei and Goon 1 fighting, Goon 2 takes this opportunity to take away the magazine and bring it to Riku. Seeing the magazine, Riku smiles as he tears it up. Seeing that his treasured magazine get ripped apart, he charges at Riku with a small battle cry that Riku scoffs at and punches Issei, knocking him back. Goon 1 and Goon 2 attack Matsuda and Motohama, while Riku keeps punching Issei down. As the lunch break is almost at the end, Issei looks to his right as Matsuda is getting beaten. Seeing his childhood friend getting beaten, something snaps in Issei as he feels his power growing and growing as he picks up Riku by his stomach and throws him away. Seeing their leader get thrown off, Goon 1 and Goon 2 go to check on their leader. While on the playground floor, Riku is screaming, "I am going to kill you, Heidi, you are not safe from me." Issei's rage still boiling over, it's almost like it's going to blow. Issei stands up, screams at Riku and his goons. When Issei screams, all the power that was boiling over explodes in Issei in a burst of pure energy. It temporarily changes the color of his from light red to deep dark red. The eyes of all three of the bullies also glow red for a bit as both of the bullies turn and attack Riku, while Goon 1 says, "Issei is mine and mine only, boss, you will never touch him again," while Goon 2 says, "He is not Goon 1's, he is mine, but you still hurt Haida, so I am going to hurt you," while Riku is fighting back against both, saying, "You are both wrong, Haida is mine, not yours, mine, I am going to marry him." Issei POV. Issei looks at this scene horrified. Seconds before, Riku was threatening to kill me, but now he wants to marry me. Issei looks at Matsuda and Motohama, but they have already ran away, leaving Issei behind. But Issei didn't have time because he heard stomping like a stampede is coming. Issei gets ready to fight, but he only sees Aram running at him at full speed. She grabs Issei and runs away. Third-person POV. Issei starts saying, "Aram, where are we going?" Aram doesn't respond. As Issei looks to his sides, he sees nothing but white light. Suddenly they stop and Issei looks around to see where they are. As we see, Issei is shocked that they are on a port in Tokyo. Issei looks at Aram and asks, "How did we get here? We were just at school." Aram mutters under her breath, "I wish you still had a bit more time." "Listen, Issei, whatever I say, take it to heart." After she said that, Issei got worried and starts to look around more and looks at her feet. They were no ordinary feet, they were like a goat's feet, and Issei looks up to ask her about that but notices that she also has horns on top of her head. Looking at that, he only says one word, sadder. Aram looks at Issei in a mixed expression, happy that he remembered all the stories about Greek mythology from when he was 4 till now, but also sad that he has to experience what being a demigod is about. She kneels at Issei's height and then says, "Yes, I am a satyr, Issei, but what am I about to tell you is going to change how you're going to see the world forever, but I will try to my fullest to make sure you are ready to defend yourself from whatever danger you will face." Issei says, "Does that mean all the Greek gods exist, and all of the Greek mythology creatures, and what was there back then? Why did Riku say he wanted to marry me?" Aram says, "I will give you all the answers when we are on the way to the camp, but before that, you should know, Issei, that you are a demigod." Third-person POV. Issei was shocked. He got bullied every day. Who had ADHD and dyslexia, how could he be a half-god like Heracles, Achilles, and his favorite Perseus? Before he could say anything, he heard a loud blaring sound like a ship was coming. This was no ordinary ship, it was a 22-foot-tall ship, 25 feet long, with the front of the ship head looking like a shark. On the boat, he spotted a woman with short brown hair built like a bull because she was buff. Seeing this bizarre sight, Issei turned around to look and ask Aram who it was. Aram looked at her with pride and joy, saying she never disappoints. Aram POV. While Aram was looking at her, she said, "That is Deborah, she is my best friend." When she looked at the ship, Deborah was just parking the ship. While looking at the ship, Deborah jumps from the ship to the port with force, blowing the hair on Aram's face back. Deborah says to Aram while looking at Issei, "So this is the demigod boy you have been protecting." As Aram nods, Deborah says go get into the ship. The mist surrounding your body is almost gone as Aram goes into the ship and signs that Issei should follow her. When Issei enters the ship and looks around, the only thought he has is massive. Third-person POV. As we can see the ship depart, the insides of the ship are completely different. It looks like a training ground. Well, the first floor, at least second floor, had the bedrooms and the med bay, and the third floor had weaponry. When Issei looked around the weaponry, he was astonished. As he runs into the room, Aram holds him by his hand and speaks. Issei, this ship is over 2,000 years old, and the weapons here are not to be touched. They are considered some of the most deadliest weapon ever, and they are behind a barrier. Issei pouts and then says, you still haven't told me why we are on a boat going so far away from Kuho. Aram looks at Issei and says, we are not just going away from Kuho, we are going away from Japan, and we are heading to the US. After hearing that, Issei is shocked. The United States of America. Aram says, yes, I know this might come as a shock to you, but Greek mythology is real and they have been living in US for over 3,000 years and you are one of their offspring. Issei, still shocked, tries to recover slowly and says, so which one did I get? Aram looks at him sadly and says, I don't know, but the power you used back there was definitely a power of a demigod. As they start walking towards fourth floor, Issei asks questions like, is my dad the god? How did it happen, and how did humans not know about them in forever, and why did I awaken my powers right now of all things? Aram starts to answer his questions. Your dad is 100% a god. I don't know which one, but the power you used back there seemed like charm that usually falls into Aphrodite's section. It's probably not her since you already have a mother, probably one of her sons, and a really strong one at that. For your second question, but one of her sons came here in Japan, which is dangerous to do for gods since Zeus the king if the gods doesn't like it, so your dad must be a troublemaker like you. For not knowing it is not that suppressing since us supernatural beings have what is called mist constantly surrounding us at all times, and is it especially strong in US because of power of the West? I don't know what power of the West is exactly, but the mist follows it, and so do we. You awakening your powers was bound to happen someday. And I was treading that day because the day you awaken your powers, your life as a normal human is over. You will be hunted relentlessly by monsters and you need to learn to protect yourself. Any more questions? Issei asks. Yes, just to what is the camp we are going to, and why didn't my mom or my dad was there to teach me things? Aram sighs sadly and says we are going to Camp Half-Blood. It teaches demigods to fight and control their powers. For the next question, it is clear that your mom didn't know your dad was a god, and gods don't stick around for their kid to grow up. They abandon the women carrying their child and then just leave. But why would they do that? Aram looks at Issei and says very seriously that gods only care about themselves. They are immortal and all-powerful beings. They can create life out of nothing and destroy civilizations with a snap of their fingers. They are truly scary. Hearing that, Issei gulps, kind of scared, but stands up, and now they were on the fourth floor. Aram asks Deborah how many days till we get to the camp. Deborah looks at Aram, and 13 days, she says. Perfect, and looks at Issei. Till then we have time to prepare you for the camp. Me and Deborah will train you relentlessly till then. Issei looks at Aram and asks how strong I think I will get. Aram ponders for a bit, and says the demigods are divided into three factors. First, the low demigods, the sons of minor gods like Nemesis, and such. They can at a verge travel at the speed of 50 km per hour on foot, and pick up about 30 tons of weight. Then we have sons of Olympians. They can pick up at least about 60 tons, and can run at speeds up to 150 km per hour. Well, at least that are your gods like Athena, Ares, Apollo, but some gods surpass everyone in terms of strength. The big three of the Greek mythology: Zeus the king of gods, Hades the ruler of the underworld, and Poseidon the monarch of the ocean. Their kids can lift up to 120 tons and run up to speeds till 250 km per hour. Well, that all depends on the training. If you train hard enough, even you can surpass the kids of the big three. So rest for today. Tomorrow we will start your regular training. Third-person POV. It was morning around 6 a.m. Thukfed BSSD and Issei fell on his but Aoi. Issei had worn a white GI with a black belt to hold it together, and with a shurnai in hand. Issei said, you know you can go easy on me, right? Standing over him was a 6-foot-tall woman named Deborah. She said with a stern look, is that all you got? Pipsqueak monsters are not going to take it easy on you. Issei stood up while wiping his GI, saying, I know, but I don't think I am suited for the sword. It doesn't feel right in my hands. Deborah sighs and says, yeah, but I usually use a giant club to fight, and Aram uses a spear, plus you wanted to learn the sword. Issei says, yeah, I thought I would look cool while wielding a sword, but whatever. Hey, we have to go get breakfast pretty soon, but before that get a shower and be ready for Aram's 9 a.m. lesson. Issei moans and sighs, but does get a shower. Issei has a strict timetable. It goes like this. Wake up at 4:50 a.m. Start training at 5 a.m. till 6 a.m. Breakfast at 6:30 a.m. till 7:15 a.m. Schoolwork from 7:20 till 8:50 a.m. Aram's classes from 9 a.m. till 10:30 a.m. Break from 10:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. Lunch from 12 p.m. till 12:30 p.m. Training from 12:35 p.m. till 2:30 p.m. Playtime from 2:30 p.m. till 5:30 p.m. Learn about the supernatural world/history 5:30 p.m. till 7:30 p.m. Dinner 7:30 till 8:20. Bedtime 8:20 till 4:50 a.m. This routine went on for 7 days. Issei's 9 a.m. class with Aram is sometimes about handling a spear or learning strategy meetings. Issei POV. One night Issei had to take a leak, so as he was running to the bathroom after he took the leak, still tired from all the training that Deborah and Aram put him under, Issei said, "Oh my gods, they cannot take a little easy on me, even monster wouldn't fight me this much." As he finishes taking the leak, he heads back to the bed but sees the light radiating of Aram's room. He decides to go check as to why she is awake at this time of hour. As he goes near the room, he can hear a familiar voice. It was his mother. His stomach sank. She was screaming at Aram, so Issei decided to eavesdrop. Mickey was screaming at Aram and Deborah that this was the last time that brat got into a fight. She was done with him. Mickey said, "This is the second time he has got into a fight. Where did I go wrong raising such a delinquent? Take him away from me. I am moving to Europe. Either way, I do not want to see that kid again." Aram was mad. Deborah took the phone from Aram's hand and screamed at the phone, "You will be lucky to have a son like Issei. In this past week he has shown growth comparable to that of prodigies," and she then hangs up the phone. Issei was crying and then runs away to God's, but the last thing he sees is Deborah comforting Aram, who was also crying. When Issei stops running, he finds himself on the 3rd floor of the armory, and Issei remembered what Aram said: the barrier protecting this mystical artifact only lets worthy demigods in, and the weapons chooses the warrior worthy enough to wield it. And Issei said, "If I get chosen by a weapon, my mother, who thinks so low of me, has to know, and at least know I am not worthless." As Issei comes near the barrier, he sees the armory. It's a drop down from where he is standing. As he touches the barrier, he is sucked down. When he is sucked down, aiming for the bottomless pit, he closes his eyes and braces for the impact, but it never comes. As he stands floating in front of a huge box, as he opens that box in mid-air, it was a reddish cylinder and a gold armband. As Issei wears his armband and touches the red cylinder, he thinks this is the weapon that is supposedly dangerous. It's just a hollow cylinder. He starts moving up slowly and exiting the weaponry. He was now teleported to the training area. He looks at the hollow cylinder and remembers something that Deborah used to say: whenever you are fighting with a sword, focus on your surroundings more, sharpen your instincts, make your ADHD work for you. While thinking about that, he feels darkness inside his heart, remembering what his mom said about him, and just like that, darkness turns into rage, and he squeezes his wrist with the cylinder in it. As he does that, he hears SHHK. He looks down, and the cylinder had become a blood-red color sword, and surprisingly it was glowing. Issei's rage vanishes as he looks at the glowing sword. Somehow, even though a regular sword doesn't feel right in his hand, somehow this sword, Issei felt like he could take on the world. As the glow lowers down, he can see something written on the sword. It was Delta Omega Nu Iota. Issei could easily read this somehow, and Issei said, "Adonis." As he looks down in his hand at the sword, and he thinks for a while, "I got it, I will call it Bloodweep." As he says that, he thinks on how this happened and quickly realizes his rage as he tries to channel it through his sword. As the edges of the sword glow brighter, but his rage is like a spiraling tornado, so he tries to stop, but he says it hurts too much to stop. He just wants to burst, explode with rage as his eyes start to glow red. He had that same feeling when he was getting attacked by Rika, but 3x says worse. AARGH, he screams as the whole ship shakes and Issei falls down. Aram POV. As the call ends with Issei's mother, as Aram is almost reduced to tears, she says, "How could someone's mother be so cruel to her own son?" As Deborah hugs Aram, she says, "It's okay, Aram, Issei doesn't live with her anymore. But I still can't believe Mickey how." "It's okay now," says Deborah, cutting Aram off as they talk about how Issei will survive in the camp. "Those Aphrodite girls are going bully Issei," says Aram. "I know, but Issei can handle it. But how is going to live in the Aphrodite cabin? Did you convince Cairo?" Deborah Aram says, raising her voice a bit, "Yes, I did. Let's not talk about it more." As they finish having their conversation, they hear a loud noise as the ship shakes where it did come from, the armory, as Deborah and Aram sprint towards it. As they reach to the armory, and seeing some locks open, they open the door, weapons in arm ready, as the only thing they see is Issei sleeping on the floor. When they approach him, they see that in his hand is a red cylinder and a gold armband. As Deborah picks up Issei's unconscious body, and this boy is something he broke into the armory and got himself a weapon. Aram looks at Issei, and is he going to be okay? Yeah, it's fine, he is just tired, he will back on his feet in no time. As they put Issei to sleep and then go to their own room to sleep. In the morning, Issei wakes up to the sound of the seagulls with force. As Issei looks around while being out of breath, he looks around. He was in his room, the same messy room. Issei looks at his night table, he looks at the red cylinder and the gold armband. He grabs that stuff when he hears a knock on his door. "Come in," says Issei, and Aram comes into the door. "And good to see you are awake." Without a second thought, Issei gets up and hugs Aram. Says, "Whoa there, did you sleep well? We have only got 5 days till you reach the camp, 30 minutes later. At breakfast, Deb asks Issei, "So little man, how did you get your weapon? Can you use it properly?" Issei says, "I have no clue how to use it properly." Aram says, "It's made of something called a crimson adamant." "Crimson adamant?" screams Deborah. "It's the most fascinating metal in the entirety of Greek mythos." Issei is shocked at the scream that Deborah just made. It was like talking to fan about something they love. Issei could hear the enthusiasm in her voice. Issei asks, "Can you tell me the origin of this metal?" He hears Aram say from the kitchen when she is making breakfast, "Don't get her started," but it was too late. We can see Deborah bursting from excitement as she goes on the rant about crimson adamant. She says without taking a break, "Crimson adamant is no ordinary metal. It's forged in the blazing, volcanic heart of Tartarus itself, a place of unrelenting chaos and ancient power. Born from battle, it comes to life when molten rock drinks deep the lifeblood of slain monsters and the searing wrath of fallen titans. Every drop of it pulses with the hatred, fury, and defiance of those defeated in ancient, earth-shattering wars. This blood-red metal is as rare as it is volatile, a force of nature that almost refuses to be tamed. Crafting it demands not just skill, but mastery. Only the boldest, most daring artisans dare to wrestle its wild energy into form. It's a material of legend, alive with the echoes of battles long past, its fiery soul burning to be unleashed. Issei says, well, that was a lot to hear at once, but I am sure you will train me to use it right. She says yes without hesitation. Deborah, that is with pure excitement. For the next 5 days I will teach you to use the armband and the weapons that red adamant gives you. Issei says weapons as in plural, and Deborah just nods. 5 days later. Issei stops on the shore of the camp with a fresh simile. Aram says, have you got everything? Yes, as he checks his pouch with 25 golden drachmas and a note to give to Chiron. Issei was wearing a black shirt and a white pant, basically like Toji. He had the red cylinder tied to his neck like a necklace with a long black string going around his neck and a golden armband. Deborah says the camp is only 25 minutes away from here. Just follow the trail of the grass. Got it, says Issei, and heads for the deep dark forest. Here is what he found out about his weapon, that it has 3 forms. It can change into a sword, a spear, and a chain. For 5 days he learned to use them a bit, but for now he was kind of proficient with the spear and the sword. He started calling his spear the Heartpiercer. Its appearance was magnificent. This sleek, deadly spear features a long, crimson shaft forged from crimson adamant, etched with glowing red runes. The spearhead, shaped like an elongated flame, burns with a faint inner light, flickering as if alive. A chain of delicate gold links wraps around the base, glowing faintly when the spear is used. The sword was called Bloodsweep. He really liked to name his sword that. After going through many decisions, this sword had the perfect name fit for a warrior. The sword appearance changed a bit. It started to look like a one-handed longsword with a blade that seems to pulse like a heartbeat. The edges of the blade glow crimson, and its fuller is engraved with a pattern of intertwining roses and thorns. The hilt is encrusted with a ruby shaped like a teardrop, glowing faintly. The chain is called Binding Flame as it looks like a long, flexible chain made entirely of crimson adamant links, each shaped like a miniature heart intertwined with thorns. The chain is tipped with a weighted spike that burns with a flickering crimson flame. Of course, everyone has their special abilities, but then we get to the armband. It was a shield made forged from draconic gold, a mythical alloy infused with molten dragon scales. This rare metal glows with a deep, fiery hue, shifting between crimson and gold, as if flames were trapped beneath its surface. The shield is imbued with both the ferocity of a dragon and the divine craftsmanship of Hephaestus. The name of the shield is called Igens Draconis. The shield is a large, kite-shaped piece with a scaled texture, resembling the hide of a dragon. The rim is edged with jagged patterns that evoke dragon fangs, giving it a fierce, predatory look. At its center lies an emblem of a roaring dragon head, its eyes formed from glowing rubies that flicker like embers. Fiery veins pulse across the shield's surface, glowing brighter in combat. When the shield activates its powers, it radiates heat and casts flickering shadows like dragonfire. As Issei is walking with his weapons, he hears something roaring in the distance. Then it was silent. The monster's growl shattered the silence, low and rumbling like distant thunder. From the shadows emerged a chimera, its mismatched heads glaring at him with murderous intent. The lion head roared, flames licking at its mane, while the serpent tail hissed venomously, its fangs dripping with a sickly green liquid. Issei's heart pounded in his chest. This was no training exercise. This thing wasn't just trying to scare him, it wanted to kill him. The chimera lunged, faster than Issei could react. He barely raised Ignis Draconis in time, the shield absorbing the brunt of the lion's claws. The force knocked him off his feet and sent him skidding back into a tree. Pain shot through his back, and his breath came in short gasps. This is bad, really bad, Issei muttered, scrambling to his feet. The chimera didn't let up. Its serpent tail lashed out, and Issei swung Bloodsweep instinctively. The crimson blade cut through the tail, drawing black blood, but the strike wasn't deep enough to stop it. The tail whipped around, hitting him across the chest and sending him flying. He hit the ground hard, coughing and clutching his ribs. I can't do this, I'm not strong enough, he whispered, fear creeping into his voice. The chimera roared again, the goat head exhaling a thick cloud of noxious smoke. Issei staggered to his feet, eyes stinging and lungs burning, but he held his ground. No, I can't let it get to the camp. The lion head charged, and Issei barely managed to activate Binding Flame. The fiery chain snapped forward, wrapping around the lion's muzzle and snapping it shut. Stay back! He shouted, yanking the chain with all his might. The chimera snarled, its goat head lowering to ram him. Issei swung Heartpiercer, his spear, at the incoming attack. The spear's crimson glow flared as it struck, knocking the chimera back a step. But it wasn't enough. The monster was relentless. Its serpent tail lashed out again, and this time, it struck Issei's leg. He cried out in pain as he fell, the venomous fangs tearing through his jeans and leaving a burning wound. The pain was overwhelming. He felt the world spinning, his vision blurring. I can't win this, he thought. The chimera loomed over him, its lion head snarling as it prepared to unleash a blast of fire. Issei raised Ignis Draconis, but his arms were trembling. He couldn't hold it steady. And then, something deep inside him stirred. A fiery pain erupted in his left hand, and he screamed as a crimson gauntlet materialized around it. The boosted gear. The artifact felt hot against his skin, but it pulsed with power, a power he didn't understand but couldn't ignore. Boost. The word rang in his ears, clear and commanding. Suddenly, his strength surged. The fear that had paralyzed him moments ago melted away, replaced by a burning chimera's fire roared toward him, but Issei didn't flinch. With newfound strength, he slammed Ignis Draconis into the ground. The shield transformed, its surface shifting into the likeness of a dragon's head. Dragon Roar! A wave of fire and sound erupted from the shield, colliding with the chimera's flames and pushing them back. The monster staggered, giving Issei the opening he needed. He gripped Heartpiercer tightly and charged, the boosted gear amplifying his speed and power. He leaped into the air, the spear glowing with crimson energy. With a shout, he drove the spear into the chimera's goat head, the force of the blow sending cracks through its skull. The chimera howled in pain, thrashing wildly. The serpent tail struck him again, this time sending him crashing to the ground. The world swam around Issei as he pushed himself to his knees. The chimera was wounded, but it wasn't done. Its lion head snarled, but its movements were sluggish. I just need one more hit, Issei thought. But his strength was fading fast. The boosted gear pulsed again. Boost! Fueled by one final surge of power, Issei grabbed Bloodsweep and charged. The crimson blade ignited as he slashed across the lion's throat. The chimera let out a final, guttural roar before collapsing to the ground, its body dissolving into ash. Issei stood over the remains, his chest heaving. The boosted gear flickered, then vanished, leaving his hand bare. I did it, he whispered before his legs gave out. Darkness closed in, and he fell unconscious. You know that feeling when you're sure the universe is messing with you? Like, no matter what you do, it's got a bullseye painted on your back? That's my life, in a nutshell. My name's Percy Jackson. I'm 12 years old, and I've got more problems than I can count. ADHD, dyslexia, and a knack for attracting bullies like flies to garbage. But even I wasn't ready for what went down on that school field trip. It all started at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Our class was supposed to be learning about ancient Greek stuff, which, spoiler alert, was not my thing. The statues were cool, sure, but the plaques? They might as well have been written in Martian. Dyslexia's great like that. I was trying to keep a low profile. Keyword, trying. But Nancy Bobofit, the queen of obnoxious, wasn't having it. Hey, Jackson. She sneered, flicking bits of her peanut butter sandwich at me. You trying to read that plaque? You're gonna hurt yourself. She laughed, loud and nasty like she just told the funniest joke in the world. Her bright red hair made her look like a demented clown. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to ignore her. Nancy lived to torment me. It was her art form. But when she dumped her lunch into Grover's lap, that was it. Cut it out, Nancy, I snapped. The whole class went quiet. Even Grover gave me a wide-eyed look like, dude, what are you doing? Nancy grinned, like a cat about to pounce. Oh, what are you gonna do about it, Jackson? I wanted to say something cool, something to shut her down. But before I could, Mr. Brunner's voice cut through the tension. Mr. Jackson, he called from across the room, his tone sharp but not unkind. A word, please? Saved by the teacher. I followed Mr. Brunner to the front of the gallery, where he was lecturing about a Greek vase. He didn't scold me or ask what happened. Instead, he gave me this look, like he knew I was on the edge. Keep your focus, Percy, he said quietly. The truth is often more important than appearances. I didn't know what he meant, but his words stuck with me. Then, things got weird. During lunch, we were hanging out by this big fountain. I was trying to zone out and forget about Nancy when she struck again. Oh no, she gasped, loud enough for everyone to hear. Percy pushed me. She stumbled back dramatically, like she was auditioning for a soap opera. And then, splash, she fell into the fountain. The class erupted in laughter. I didn't touch her, I said, but no one was listening. Even Grover looked at me like I'd done something. Nancy scrambled out of the fountain, dripping wet and furious. You're dead, Jackson. But before she could charge at me, Mrs. Dodds appeared. Percy, she said, her voice sharp and cold. A word. Her eyes were like daggers, and I knew I was in trouble. She led me into a dark gallery, away from the class. My heart was pounding, but not because I thought I was getting detention. Something about her felt off. Confess, half-blood, she snarled, her face twisting into something inhuman. Her eyes burned red, and wings erupted from her back. She wasn't a teacher. She was a monster. What the? I stumbled back, my mind racing. Was this real? Was I losing it? She lunged at me, her talons aimed right for my face. Percy! Mr. Brunner's voice boomed. Out of nowhere, he tossed me something. At first, I thought it was a pen, but when I caught it, it transformed into a sword. Fight her, Percy! He shouted. I didn't know what I was doing, but instinct took over. I swung the sword, and whoosh, Mrs. Dodds exploded into golden dust. I stood there shaking, the sword still glowing in my hand. When I turned around, Mr. Brunner was gone. The sword? Just a pen again. When I got back to the group, everyone acted like nothing had happened. No Mrs. Dodds. No monster attack. Hey, I said to Grover, what happened to Mrs. Dodds? He frowned. Who? That's when I realized. My life was about to get way more complicated. You know those moments when the world feels like it's spinning out of control? That was my entire life after Mrs. Dodds turned into a monster and vanished into dust. No one else remembered her. Not my classmates. Not even Grover. Instead, they all acted like she never existed, like our math teacher was just some weird dream I had. But I knew what I saw. And the thing that scared me the most? Mr. Brunner. The way he tossed me that sword like it was meant for me. Like he knew. It all felt too real to ignore, but no one believed me. Mrs. Dodds? Grover had said, scratching his head. We've never had a teacher by that name. I wanted to scream, I'm not crazy. But what good would it do? So I played along, even as the questions in my head multiplied. What was a half-blood? Why did Mrs. Dodds call me that? And why did it feel like something big, something terrifying, was just around the corner? The next few weeks were torture. School went on as usual, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not just by teachers or classmates, but by something else. Grover didn't help my paranoia. He kept acting strange. He'd glance over his shoulder like he was expecting something to jump out of the shadows. Once, I caught him muttering to himself, words I couldn't make out. Grover, I asked, trying to sound casual, is something going on? He jumped, like I'd caught him in the middle of some secret mission. What? No. Everything's fine, Percy. Totally fine. His laugh was about as convincing as a cat claiming it didn't eat the canary. Yeah, right. The real breaking point came on the last day of school. We were riding the Greyhound bus back to the city. The weather was gloomy, like the sky itself was holding its breath. That's when I noticed the old lady. She was standing on the side of the road, draped in black. Her eyes met mine through the window, and a shiver ran down my spine. She looked like she was staring straight into my soul. Who is that? I muttered. Grover stiffened. His face went pale. Stop the bus, he whispered. What? We have to get off. Now. Before I could ask what he was talking about, the bus jerked to a stop. Grover grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong for someone so scrawny. Percy, he said, his voice low and urgent, we need to talk. About what? But he didn't answer. He just pulled me off the bus, his eyes darting around like he was searching for danger. And then it happened. The old lady was gone. In her place were them. 3 old women sat at a roadside fruit stand, knitting something long and dark, like the threads of fate itself. I don't know how I knew it, but I could feel it. They weren't human. Grover, I whispered, who are they? He didn't answer. He just stared, his face pale and full of fear. One of the women snipped a thread with her scissors, and my chest tightened like someone had just stepped on my lungs. We need to go, Grover said, pulling me back to the bus. The rest of the ride was a blur. Grover wouldn't explain anything. But by the time we got back to New York, I was certain of one thing: my life was tied to something way bigger than I understood. And it was about to unravel. That day when I went home immediately after entering my home, I could smell Gabe's sweat through. Gabe was, unfortunately, my stepfather married to my mother, who is the best person in the world but with the most rotten luck. Well, how so, you ask? Let me tell you why. My mom became orphan at the age of 5, raised by an uncle who couldn't even take care of himself, and of course with my mom's luck she got busy taking care of her uncle until he died, leaving my mom broke and hopeless until she met my dad. But that was 12 years ago. We don't talk about it much because it makes her sad. The thing my mom told me about my dad was he was an important man. One day he set sail to the Atlantic Ocean and never came back, lost at sea, she said. She worked many jobs to get her high school diploma and raised me on her own. I know it wouldn't have been easy. I mean, after all, I am a troubled kid after all. Then again, her luck strikes by marrying Gabe Ugliano. After being pleasant for the first 30 seconds of our acquaintance, Gabe Ugliano revealed himself to be a world-class jerk. He was known to me as Smelly Gabe when I was younger. I apologize, but this is the reality. The man, dressed in gym shorts, smelled of rotting garlic pizza. The thing is, we both made our mother's life, Sally Jackson's life, more difficult than it already is, and me and Gabe's relationship is bad. Here is a good example for it. When I just opened my door, I could smell him. Smelly Gabe and his friends were playing poker in the living room. ESPN blared on the TV. The carpet was covered in beer cans and chips. So you're home, he replied, barely raising his gaze from his cigar. Where is my mother? Working, he declared. Do you have any money? That was it. No welcome back. Nice to see you. How has your life been the last 6 months? Gabe had grown heavier. Wearing clothes from the thrift store, he resembled a walrus without tusks. As though it made him attractive, he had roughly 3 hairs on his head, all combed over his bald scalp. I don't have any cash, I told him. It was unexpected that Gabe could detect money like a bloodhound, because his scent ought to have obscured everything else. From the bus station, you took a taxi, he added. Most likely, a 20 was used to pay. I received $6 and $7 in change. If someone wants to live under this roof, he should be responsible for his expenses. Fine, I said. I dug through my pocket, pulled out a few dollars and threw them on the table. I hope you lose. I wouldn't act so tough today, boy. Your report card came in today. I went to my room and slammed the door, and then I heard someone call out my name, Percy. It was my mother. After seeing her, my mood instantly got better. When I looked at her smile, my heart melted. Her long brown hair with some white gray hair mixed in. Oh, Percy. She gave me a strong hug. It's unbelievable. You have matured since Christmas. Her sweet un-America attire, red, white, and blue, smelled like chocolate, licorice, and everything else she sold at the Grand Central Candy Store. As usual, she had brought me a large bag of free samples when I got home. She asked me how have been the last 6 months of my life, to tell her everything I hadn't written in my letters, and I told her everything. By the end of it, she was comforting me. Hey, Sally, how about some bean dip, huh? Shouted Gabe from the other room. I tightened my jaw. There is no nicer woman in the world than my mother. Instead of marrying a jackass like Gabe, she ought to have married a millionaire. I made an effort to seem positive about my final days at Yancey Academy for her benefit. I informed her that the expulsion didn't really bother me. This time, I had lasted nearly the entire year. I had gained several new acquaintances. I had performed fairly well in Latin. The fighting hadn't been as horrible as the headmaster claimed, to be honest. Yancey Academy appealed to me. Yes, I did. I nearly persuaded myself that I had a fantastic year. As I thought of Grover and Mr. Brunner, I began to choke. Suddenly, even Nancy Bobofit didn't seem so horrible. Until that museum visit. What? My mother inquired. Her gaze tried to extract the secrets while tugging at my conscience. Did you feel afraid of anything? No, Mother. Lying made me feel horrible. Though I believed it would sound foolish, I wanted to tell her about Mrs. Dodds and the 3 elderly women with the yarn. Her lips were pursed. She didn't press me even though she knew I was holding back. Well, after she said, Percy, I have a surprise for you, she said, we are going to the beach. My eyes got big. Montauk? The same cabin, 3 nights. When? She grinned. As quickly as I change. It was unbelievable to me. Gabe claimed there wasn't enough money, so my mom and I hadn't visited Montauk in the previous 2 summers. Sally, bean dip? Gabe snarled as he emerged in the doorway. Did you not hear me? I wanted to punch him, but when I looked into my mother's eyes, I realized she was making me an offer: treat Gabe nicely for a short time. Only when she was prepared to depart from Montauk. After that, we would leave this place. She informed Gabe, honey, I was on my way. We were just discussing the trip. Gabe's eyes narrowed. The journey? You mean you took that seriously? I was aware of it, I whispered. He will not let us leave. He will, of course, my mother responded calmly. Your stepfather is only concerned with his finances. That's all. Additionally, Gabriel won't have to make do with bean dip, she continued. He will get enough 7-layer dip from me for the entire weekend. Guacamole. Sour cream. The process. Gabe became a little softer. So, this trip money comes from your clothing budget, correct? Yes, my mom answered, honey. And you will only drive my car there and back. We'll use extreme caution. As Sally goes to change and Gabe resumes his poker game. I thought I saw anxiety in her eyes, the same fear I'd seen in Grover during the bus ride, as if my mom also felt a strange chill in the air. However, her smile returned, and I assumed I must have been mistaken. She ruffled my hair and went to make Gabe his 3-layer dip. Thank you, Percy, my mom said. Once we get to Montauk, we'll talk more about whatever you've forgotten to tell me, okay? We were prepared to depart an hour later. Gabe paused his poker game long enough to observe me carrying my mother's luggage to the vehicle. He kept griping and complaining about losing her cooking, and more important, his '78 Camaro, for the whole weekend. As I loaded the final bag, he cautioned me, this car is in perfect condition, brain boy. Not even a tiny scrape. As if I were the one behind the wheel. I was 12. But Gabe didn't care about that. He would find a way to blame me if a seagull even soiled his paint work. I became so enraged as I watched him stumbling back toward the apartment complex that I did something I cannot explain. I made the hand motion I had seen Grover make on the bus as Gabe got to the doorway. It was a warding off evil gesture, where I clawed my hand over my heart before pushing Gabe in my direction. He was sent flying up the stairs as though he had been blasted from a cannon when the screen door slammed shut with such force that it struck him in the butt. I didn't remain long enough to find out, although it might have been the wind or some strange hinge accident. I instructed my mother to step on it after getting into the Camaro. While we were in the car, I should explain the place. It had sand on the bed way out of tip of Long Island. The cabin was a little pastel box. It was a bit rundown. It had sand in the bed sheets and spiders in the cabin, and the sea was always too cold to swim, but I never had a problem with it. The cabin was perfect. I loved it. Since I was a baby, we had been visiting the place. My mother had continued to live longer. I realized why the beach held special meaning for her, even if she never explicitly stated it. It was where she had first met my father. She appeared younger as we approached Montauk, with years of stress and labor fading from her face. Her eyes took on the hue of the ocean. After arriving at sunset, we cleaned the cabin as usual and opened all the windows. We snacked on blue jelly beans, blue saltwater taffy, and all the other free samples my mom had brought from work while taking a stroll on the beach and feeding blue corn chips to the seagulls. I guess I should explain the blue food. You see, my mom had been assured by Gabe that there was no such thing. At the time, their altercation appeared like a very minor one. However, my mother has made it a point to eat blue ever since. Her birthday cakes were blue. She blended smoothies with blueberries. She brought blue sweets home from the store and also blue corn tortilla chips. This demonstrated that she wasn't completely duped by Gabe, as did the fact that she continued to go by her maiden name, Jackson, instead of Mrs. Ugliano. Like me, she did have a rebellious streak. We built a fire as it grew dark. We roasted marshmallows and hot dogs. Before her parents perished in the plane tragedy, Mom used to tell me stories about her early years. When she had enough money to stop working at the candy store, she informed me about the books she hoped to write. Finally, I worked up the courage to inquire about my father, who was always in my thoughts whenever we traveled to Montauk. Mom's eyes became hazy. Although I anticipated hearing the same things she always did, I never grew weary of them. She remarked, "He was nice, Percy. Tall, good-looking, and strong. However, gentle as well. You are aware that you have his green eyes and black hair." Mom reached into her candy bag and pulled out a blue jelly bean. "Percy, I wish he could see you. He would be quite proud." I questioned how she was able to say that. What made me so wonderful? A hyperactive, dyslexic child who received a D on his report card was expelled from school for the 6th time in 6 years. I inquired what was my age. When he left, that is. She observed the fire. "Percy, he was with me for just one summer. This beach is right here. This cabin. However, he knew me from birth." "No, honey. He never saw you, but he was aware that I was having a child. He had to depart prior to your birth." I made an effort to reconcile that with the fact that I appeared to recall something about my dad. A cozy glow. A grin. As a baby, I had always thought he knew me. Even though my mother had never stated it directly, I had a gut feeling that it must be real. To be informed that he had never ever laid eyes on me. I was upset with my dad. Perhaps it was foolish, but I was angry with Dad for not having the courage to wed my mother and for embarking on that sea adventure. We were left with smelly Gabe when he went. "Will you send me away once more?" I questioned her. "To another residential school?" She took a marshmallow out of the flames. "Honey, I have no idea." She spoke in a strong voice. "I believe that we will need to take some action." "Because I'm not welcome here?" As soon as I said the words, I felt regret. Tears filled my mother's eyes. She grabbed my hand and gave it a firm squeeze. "Oh no, Percy. I must, my dear. For your own benefit. I must send you on your way." Her remarks brought to recall Mr. Brunner's statement that it would be best for me to leave Yancy. I said, "Because I'm not normal." "Percy, you say that like it's a terrible thing. However, you are unaware of your importance. I believe that Yancy Academy would be sufficiently distant. I assumed you would be safe at last." Safe from what? I had been stalked on the playground in 3rd grade by a man wearing a black trench coat. He left grumbling when the teachers threatened to call the police, but when I explained that the man only had one eye, in the center of his head, beneath his wide-brimmed hat, no one took me seriously. A very early memory before that. A teacher put me to sleep in a crib that a snake had slithered into when I was in preschool. When my mother arrived to take me up, she shrieked to see me playing with a limp, scaly rope that I had somehow strangled to death with my meaty baby hands. My mother remarked, "I've tried to keep you as close to me as I could." They informed me that was an error. "Percy, the location your father intended for you to go is your only choice. And I simply cannot bear to do it." Did my dad want me to attend a special school? "Not a school," she muttered. "A camp for the summer." My mind was racing. Why would my dad, who hadn't even lived long enough to see my birth, bring up summer camp with my mother? And why hadn't she brought it up earlier if it was so important? She saw the expression in my eyes and murmured, "I'm sorry, Percy. However, I am unable to discuss it. I was unable to send you there. It might entail bidding you farewell forever." "For good? However, if it's just a summer camp." She turned to face the fire, and I could see by her expression that she would start crying if I continued to interrogate her. I had an intense dream that night. 2 lovely creatures, a golden eagle and a white horse, were attempting to murder one another at the surf's edge as it was storming on the beach. With its enormous talons, the eagle swooped down and cut the horse's muzzle. The eagle's wings were kicked by the horse as it sprang up. The ground rumbled as they battled, and somewhere beneath the surface, a hideous voice laughed, encouraging the creatures to fight even more. Knowing that I had to prevent them from killing one another, I sprinted in slow time in their direction. I was aware that it would be too late. I screamed when I watched the eagle plunge down with its beak pointed at the horse's big eyes. As I screamed no, I woke up. When me and I looked outside the window, we could see that there was a hurricane, which was unusual for Long Island. Then a sound, like mallets in the sand, much closer. Someone was shouting and beating on the door of our cabin with a desperate voice. In her nightgown, my mother leaped from her bed and flung open the latch. Grover was framed by the pouring rain as he stood in the doorway. He wasn't exactly Grover, though. "All night searching," he exclaimed. "What were you contemplating?" Not afraid of Grover, but rather of the reason he had arrived, my mother gazed at me in horror. She called out, "Percy," loud enough to be heard over the rain. "What took place at school? What did you fail to tell me?" I stared at Grover, frozen. I was unable to comprehend what I was witnessing. "Oh, Zukai Alatheoi!" He raised his voice. "It is directly behind me. Did you not inform her?" He had just cursed in ancient Greek, and I had understood him well, but I was too horrified to notice. How Grover got here alone in the middle of the night was beyond my comprehension because I was so astonished. Grover's legs should have been where they were because he was not wearing his pants. My mother gave me a severe look and spoke in a voice she had never used before. "Percy. Now tell me." My mother looked at me, her face deathly pale from the lightning strikes, while I muttered something about Mrs. Dodds and the elderly women at the fruit stand. "Go to the car," she urged, grabbing her purse and throwing my rain jacket to me. "You too. Go." Grover was not really sprinting when he ran for the Camaro. His tale about a muscle condition in his legs suddenly made sense to me as he was walking at a clip and shaking his shaggy hindquarters. I could see how he was able to run so quickly without losing his gait. Because there were no feet where he should have had them. The feet were cloven. His hairy hindquarters trembled as he trotted, and then his tale of a muscular problem in his legs. I could see how he was able to run so quickly without losing his gait. Because there were no feet where he should have had them. The feet were hooves. XX equals scene change equals XX. We had started driving far away and in heavy rain to God knows where. I don't think mine knows where we were going. I looked over at Grover and at his legs, seeing them made of fur, and their smell was also like that of zoo animals, and all I could think of saying was, "So, you and my mother are acquainted?" Despite the absence of any cars behind us, Grover's gaze darted to the rearview mirror. "Not precisely," he remarked. "We've never actually met, after all." However, she was aware that I was observing you. Observing me? I'm watching you. Ensuring your well-being. However, I wasn't pretending to be your friend, he hurriedly added. Your friend is me. Well, what exactly are you? That isn't relevant at the moment. Does it not matter? My dearest friend is a donkey from the waist down. Grover gave a harsh, raspy blah-ha-ha. Even though I had heard him make that sound previously, I had always thought it was an anxious chuckle. I now understood it to be more of a bleat of irritation. Goat! He exclaimed. What? From the waist down, I'm a goat. You stated that it was irrelevant. Blah ha ha. For such an insult, some satyrs would trample you underfoot. Whoa. Hold on. Satyrs. What do you mean by Mr. Brunner's myths? Percy, were the elderly women at the fruit stand real or imagined? Was there a myth about Mrs. Dodds? You acknowledge that Mrs. Dodds existed. Obviously. So why? Grover stated the less you knew, the fewer monsters you'd attract, as if that were crystal clear. We covered the human eyes with mist. We hoped the kindly one would appear to be a delusion. However, it was not good. You began to recognize yourself. Who I? What do you mean? Hold on a second. Somewhere behind us, closer than before, the strange roaring sound arose once more. We were still pursuing whatever was pursuing us. My mother said, "There's not enough time and too much to explain, Percy. We must bring you to a safe place." What is safety from? Who is pursuing me? Grover remarked, "Oh, nobody much," clearly still irritated by the donkey remark. "Just a few of his bloodthirsty minions and the Lord of the Dead." Grover. I apologize, Mrs. Jackson. Would you please drive more quickly? I made an effort to comprehend what was going on, but I was unsuccessful. This wasn't a dream, I knew that. I didn't have any creativity. I could never have imagined something so bizarre. My mother abruptly left. We veered onto a smaller road and sped past wooded hills, gloomy farmhouses, and white picket fences with pick-your-own-strawberries signs. Where are we heading? I inquired. The summer camp I mentioned to you. My mother was attempting to keep me from being afraid, therefore her voice sounded tense. The location your father intended for you to go. The location you wanted me to avoid. Please, my mother pleaded. This is challenging enough. Make an effort to comprehend. You are in danger. Because of some elderly women who cut yarn. Grover remarked, those weren't old ladies. The fates were those. Do you understand what it means that they showed up in front of you? Only when you're about to, or when someone is about to die, do they do it. Whoa. You is what you said. No, I didn't. Someone, I said. You intended you, as in me? I didn't mean you, but someone. Guys. My mother exclaimed. I caught a glimpse of a figure, as she jerked the wheel sharply to the right. A black, fluttering figure that she had swerved to avoid is now vanished in the storm behind us. What was that? I inquired. Ignoring my question, my mother remarked, we're almost there. 1 more mile. Please. 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 All that was visible outside was rain and darkness, resembling the desolate landscape found far out on Long Island. I recalled Mrs. Dodds and the time she had turned into the leather-winged creature with pointy teeth. My delayed shock caused my limbs to go numb. She hadn't been human at all. She intended to murder me. I then remembered Mr. Brunner and the sword he had flung at me. The hair on the back of my neck stood up before I could question Grover about it. Our automobile burst with a jaw-dropping roar and a dazzling brightness. I recall feeling weightless, as if I were simultaneously being hosed down, fried, and crushed. "Percy," Sally shouted. "I am okay." I made an effort to wake up. I was still alive. Actually, the car hadn't exploded. Our vehicle had veered into a ditch. We had our driver's side doors stuck in the mud. Rain was pouring in and the roof was broken open like an eggshell. Lightning. That was the only reason. We had just been blasted off the road. There was a large, still lump in the back seat next to me. "Grover." Blood was dripping from the side of his mouth as he sagged over. I thought, "No," and shook his fuzzy hip. "You are my dearest friend and I don't want you to die, despite the fact that you are half barnyard animal." When he moaned, "Food," I realized there was yet hope. My mother said, "Percy, we must." Her voice trailed off. I turned around. Suddenly, I noticed a guy stumbling toward us on the road's shoulder through the mud-spattered back glass. I shuddered at the sight of it. It was the dark outline of a big man who looked like a football player. He appeared to be covering his head with a blanket. He had a big, fluffy top half. He appeared to have horns due to his outstretched hands. I took a deep breath. "Who is?" With deadly seriousness, my mother continued, "Percy. Exit the vehicle." My mother flung herself at the door on the driver's side. In the muck, it was stuck shut. I gave mine a try. Also stuck. Desperately, I glanced up at the roof hole. The edges were flaming and sizzling, but it might have been an exit. My mom urged me to get out of the passenger's side. "You have to run, Percy. Is that large tree visible to you?" "What?" I saw the tree she was referring to, a massive pine at the top of the closest hill that was the size of a White House Christmas tree, through the burning hole in the roof after another lightning strike. My mother remarked, "That's the property line. A large farmhouse may be seen in the valley once you cross that hill. Don't look back while you run. Call for assistance. Continue until you get to the door." "You're coming too, Mom." Her eyes were as dejected as when she gazed at the sea, and her face was pallid. The man with the blanket on his head continued to snort and groan as he approached us. As he approached, I saw that his hands, large, meaty hands, were swinging at his sides, which made it impossible for him to be carrying a blanket over his head. No blanket was present. In other words, the large, hazy mass that was too large to be his head was indeed his head. Additionally, the tips that resembled horns. My mother informed me, "He doesn't want us. He desires you. In addition, I am unable to cross the property border." I became enraged, therefore, at Grover the goat, my mother, and the horned creature that was slowly and methodically approaching us like a bull. I pushed the door open into the downpour after climbing across Grover. "We are traveling together. Mom, hurry up. I informed you." "Mom, I won't abandon you. I need your help with Grover." I didn't hold off till she responded. After getting Grover out of the car, I clambered outside. Even though he was surprisingly light, without my mother's help, I couldn't have carried him very far. I saw the creature for the first time when I looked back. His arms and legs resembled something from the cover of Muscle Man magazine, with bulging triceps, biceps, and a variety of other seps crammed like baseballs beneath vein-webbed skin. He was 7 feet tall and easy. He was just dressed in his brilliant white Fruit of the Loom's underwear, which would have been amusing if not for the fact that his upper body was so frightening. Beginning around his belly button, his coarse brown hair grew thicker till it reached his shoulders. Okay, I knew what the creature was. One of the first stories Mr. Brunner told us featured him. He couldn't be real, though. I wiped the tears from my eyes. "That's," my mother said, "Pacifi's son. I wish I had realized how much they want to murder you." "But he's the Min." "Don't mention his name," she cautioned. "Names have power." At least 100 yards uphill, the pine tree was still far too far away. I looked over my shoulder once again. The bully crouched over our vehicle, peering, or not staring, precisely, in the windows. More akin to nuzzling or snuffling. We were about 50 feet away, so I wasn't sure why he bothered. "Food?" Grover groaned. I said to him, "Sure. What is he doing, Mom? Is he not observing us?" She remarked, "His hearing and vision are awful. He detects scents. But in due time, he will discover our whereabouts." The bullman roared in anger, as if he had been waiting for it. The chassis of Gabe's Camaro was cracking and moaning as he hauled it up by the ripped roof. He flung the automobile down the road after lifting it over his head. Before coming to a stop, it skidded in a shower of sparks for over half a mile after slamming onto the wet road. The gas tank burst. Oh no, Percy said silently and condescendingly. Percy, when he sees us, we should jump out of the way. He cannot turn very well. How do you know this? Asked Percy. I have been preparing for attacks, Percy. I was wrong to keep this from you. The bullman began to stomp uphill after letting out another roar of anger. He had detected our scent. Grover wasn't getting any lighter, and the hill was becoming slicker and steeper even though the pine tree was just a few yards away. The bully got closer. He would be on top of us in a few more seconds. Despite her obvious exhaustion, my mother took Grover's place. Go, Percy. Keep apart. Do not forget what I said. Although I didn't want to break up, I felt she was right and that it was our only option. When I turned after running to the left, I saw the thing looming over me. He had hate in his black eyes. He had a terrible meat odor. With those razor-sharp horns pointed directly at my chest, he lowered his head and charged. I wanted to run because of the nausea in my stomach, but I couldn't. This is something I could never outrun. As a result, I stood my ground and abruptly leaped aside. The bullman pawed the dirt and groaned. In an attempt to guide the monster away from Grover, he continued to eye my mother, who was now slowly backing away downhill, back toward the road. Percy, run! She yelled at me. There is nothing more I can do. Run! But as the beast charged her, I just stood there, paralyzed with horror. As she had instructed me, she attempted to avoid it, but the beast had learned his lesson. As she attempted to pull away, his hand sprang out and caught her by the neck. As she fought, kicking and beating the air, he hoisted her. Mom! She managed to gasp out one final word, go, after catching my attention. My mother vanished before my eyes, turning into a shimmering golden form that resembled a holographic projection as the monster roared in rage and locked his fists around her neck. After a dazzling flash, she was just gone. No! My anxiety gave way to anger. My limbs burned with my newfound strength, the same energy rush I had experienced when Mrs. Dodds developed talons. Grover lay defenseless in the grass as the bullman pounded down on him. As though he were going to take Grover up and cause him to disappear as well, the monster crouched down and snuffled my best friend. I couldn't let that happen. Hey! I ran to one side of the beast and yelled while waving the jacket. Hey, fool! Ground beef! Rayorer! The beast shook his beefy fists and turned to face me. I came up with an idea, a dumb one, but better than none at all. With my back to the large pine tree, I waved my red jacket at the bully, hoping to dodge him at the last second. However, that is not how it happened. The bully rushed too quickly, reaching out to seize me in every direction I attempted to avoid. Time slowed. My legs tensed. With no way to dodge, I jumped straight up, kicked off the creature's head, and landed on its neck. How did I even do that? No time to think. Its head smashed into a tree, and the jolt nearly knocked me off. It staggered, thrashing to shake me loose. I clung to its horns, rain blinding me, the stench of rot choking me, thunder roaring in my ears. Like a rodeo bull, the monster bucked and shook himself around. I was beginning to understand that this vehicle only had one gear, forward, but he should have simply backed up into the tree and smashed me flat. The bullman turned to Grover, pawing the ground to charge. I remembered how he'd squeezed the life out of my mom, and fury ignited in me. Gripping one horn with both hands, I yanked with everything I had. He tensed, grunted, and snap! The monster roared and flung me across the grass. I hit the ground hard, my head smacking a rock. Dizzy and dazed, I sat up, clutching a jagged horn the size of a knife. The bullman roared in pain, clawing at his chest before crumbling away like sand in the wind. Just like that, he was gone. The rain had stopped, but I was shaking. My head felt like it was splitting open, and I smelled like livestock. I was weak, scared, and grieving. My mom was gone, but Grover needed me. Somehow, I managed to get him up and stumbled toward the farmhouse lights. I collapsed on the porch, tears streaming down my face as I called for my mom. Through the haze, I saw a ceiling fan spinning above me, moss circling a yellow light, and two faces, a bearded man and a blonde girl. He's the one, the girl said. Quiet, Annabeth, the man replied. He's still conscious. Get him inside. Percy's POV. I had a weird dream of riding a big red dragon into a battle full of monsters. Some looked demonic. Most of them wanted to kill me, others wanted him. I tried to protect my dragon, but he got stolen away in the end. I woke up once still a bit damaged from the fight with the Minotaur, still a bit doozy. I don't know if what I saw was true, but I was being spoon-fed something that tasted like peanut butter, only it was pudding. The girl with curly blonde hair hovered over me smirking as she wiped food of my mouth with a napkin. When she saw my eyes open, she asked me what will happen at the summer solstice? What I managed to say with a bit of difficulty. As though worried that someone may listen, she glanced around. What's going on? What was stolen? We have only got a few weeks. I don't know, I managed to say before falling asleep. Next time I woke up, a big blonde dude was standing in the corner of the bedroom, and there was no sight of the girl. The blonde dude, over closer examination, was looking over at me with his eyes. He had over a dozen of the eyes. He even had eyes over on his hands and cheeks. When I fully recovered and I looked around my surroundings, I was in a room that looked like an infirmary or a clinic. My attention was suddenly brought to the attention of a resting brown-haired boy who looked to be around the same height as me, but I could see he was at least half Japanese. The brown-haired boy said in a bit broken English, "Oh man, did you finally wake up?" Percy didn't feel sarcasm coming from this boy, but genuine worry. Only one other person who is the same age as Percy did it before, and that was Grover. Percy raised his fist forward and said, "I am Percy. Percy Jackson." To the boy laying in bed and his arms covered in bandages, he also raised his fist forward and said, "I am Issei Hayadu." At that moment the greatest friendship was born. Some time later, Grover showed up to the infirmary later with tea. He handed me the tea and said, "Careful, drink it while it's hot." Grover was wearing an orange t-shirt with Camp Half-Blood said on it. So I knew it wasn't true, but I still hoped that Mom was alive and all this was a bad dream, a nightmare. "Thanks for saving my life," said Grover. "I wanted to. You're welcome, but then that would make it come true." Grover moved silently and placed down a shoe box. When I opened the shoe box, I saw the horn of the Minotaur covered in dried blood. "The Minotaur," I said. "Percy, it isn't a good idea to." "That's what he is, isn't he?" I asked with a serious tone. "The Minotaur is half bull and half man." Grover looked at me and said in a sad tone, "You and Issei have been asleep for 2 days now. How much do you guys remember?" "My mom, is she?" Grover looked down. "I am so sorry to hear that," said Issei. I looked at Issei with a sad look. "Well, I have to go outside." I was afraid to cry in front of my new friend. When I went outside, there were groves of trees, a winding stream, and a huge strawberry farm, and in a distance, there was a pine tree on top of a hill. I ran up to the hill. I sat in front of the pine cone tree. My mother was gone, my only pillar of support. Everything was spinning. Was it cause I was injured? I didn't care anymore, and I started to feel empty. Grover and Issei followed me. Grover apologized to me, saying I am the worst satyr in history. Well, that says a lot. If I look carefully, I can see tiny horns poking out from his head. "Percy, I am sorry I failed to protect you. Did I say it was your fault? Did I ask you to protect me, or did my mom?" I asked in a hushed voice. "It's our job to protect young demigods." As I went back to my bed with Issei and Grover and drank the tea, it felt like every single fatigue was removed as I felt rejuvenated. The tea tasted like the best hot chocolate, the same one my mom used to make. "How do you feel?" asked Grover. "Like I can chuck Nancy Bobofit 100 feet. By the way, don't drink any more of that stuff." "What do you mean?" He took the glass out of my hand and said, "Come on, Cryan and Mr. D are waiting. You follow to Issei. Oh, call me Issei, okay Issei." As we walked for a little while and we reached a big house, as I looked around the surroundings. As I thought to myself, the valley on this side of the house marched all the way up to the water, which gleamed approximately a mile away, indicating that we must have been on Long Island's north shore. I was just unable to digest all I was seeing between here and there. There were several structures scattered around the landscape that resembled ancient Greek architecture, such as a circular arena, an amphitheater, and an open-air pavilion, but they were all brand new, with white marble columns that gleamed in the sunlight. 12 high school-aged children and teenagers played volleyball in a nearby sandpit. Gliding across a little lake were canoes. Around a group of cabins tucked away in the woods, children wearing bright orange t-shirts similar to Grover's were chasing one another. At an archery range, some people fired targets. Others rode horses along a path through woods, and if my vision was correct, some of their horses had wings. 2 men were seated across from one another at a card table at the end of the porch. At their side, leaning on the porch rail, was the blonde who had spoon-fed me peanut butter-flavored pudding. The guy in front of me was short but plump. He had curly hair that was so dark it was nearly purple, a crimson nose, and large, watery eyes. He resembled those images of infant angels, or what are they called, hubbubs? Cherubs, no. That's all. He had the appearance of a middle-aged cherub who had grown up in a trailer park. He would have been perfectly at home at one of Gabe's poker parties, wearing a Hawaiian shirt with a tiger print, but I had the impression that he could have outgambled even my stepfather. I heard Grover whisper, "That's Mr. D. He is the camp director. Be considerate. Annabeth Chase is the girl." Despite only being a camper, she has spent more time here than most others. And Chiron is someone you already know. He gestured toward the man facing away from me. I first became aware that he was seated in a wheelchair. Then I recognized the scraggly beard, the thinning brown hair, and the tweed jacket. "Mr. Brunner!" I sobbed. The Latin instructor turned to me and grinned. When he pulled a pop quiz and gave all of the multiple-choice responses B, his eyes had that sly gleam that occasionally appeared in class. He answered, "Ah, good, Percy. Now we have enough people for Pinnacle, 5 now." He offered me a chair on Mr. D's right, who gave me a bloodshot look and let out a long sigh. "Oh, I guess I have to say it. Greetings from Camp Half-Blood. There. Don't expect me to be happy to see you now." Thanks, I guess. Since I had discovered one thing from living with Gabe, I moved a bit more away from him. Was how to determine whether an adult has been using happy juice. I was a sadder if Mr. D didn't know what booze was. "Annabeth?" The blonde girl was called to by Mr. Brunner. She stepped up, and we were introduced by Mr. Brunner. "Percy and Issei, this young woman helped you both recover. Why don't you go check on Percy's bunk, Annabeth, my love? For the time being, we will place him in cabin 11 and Issei in cabin 11. Annabeth said, "Yes, Chiron." She was a lot more athletic looking, perhaps a few inches taller, and definitely my age. She looked nearly precisely like the stereotypical California girl I had imagined, with her wavy blonde hair and deep tan, but her eyes marred the picture. They were strikingly gloomy, akin to storm clouds, attractive, yet menacing, as though she were figuring out how to defeat me in combat. "You drool when you sleep," she said instead. Her blonde hair flew behind her as she dashed across the yard. "So," I began, eager to shift the conversation. "Mr. Brunner, you work here?" The former Mr. Brunner remarked, "Not Mr. Brunner. Regretfully, that was a pseudonym. You can refer to me as Chiron." "All right." Looking at the director, I was completely bewildered. "And Mr. D, is there anything that represents?" Mr. D ceased rearranging the cards. He gave me a look as if I had just let out a huge belch. "Names have a lot of power, young man. You don't use them carelessly all the time." Chiron Brunner interrupted, "I must say, Percy, I'm glad to see you alive. I haven't visited a prospective camper at their home in a very long time. I would hate to believe that I have squandered my time." "House call?" "I came to Yancey Academy this year to teach you. Naturally, most schools have satyrs on duty to keep an eye out. However, Grover informed me as soon as he saw you. I chose to come upstate because he felt you were unique. The other Latin instructor was persuaded to take a leave of absence by me." I made an effort to recall the start of the academic year. Although it seems like a very long time ago, I vaguely recall that during my first week at Yancey, there was another Latin teacher. After that, he vanished without warning, and Mr. Brunner attended the class. "You came to Yancey to just teach me?" I asked. Chiron looked at me and Issei and said, "You two might be two of the newest additions to the camp and the most promising people here, but you guys still have a lot to learn." "Grover, are you playing or not?" Mr. D asked anxiously. "Yes, sir." Although I didn't understand why he should be so terrified of a plump little man wearing a Hawaiian shirt with a tiger print, Grover shuddered as he sat down in the fourth chair. "Are you guys proficient in Pinnacle?" Mr. D gave me a wary look. I said, "I'm afraid not." "Sir, I'm afraid not," he said. "What is this location? Why am I here? Why would you travel to Yancey Academy merely to instruct me, Mr. Brunn, Chiron?" Mr. D snorted. I posed the same query. The cards were dealt by the camp director. Every time one fell into Grover's pile, he winced. As if to convey that I was his best student regardless of my grade, Chiron gave me a sympathetic smile, just like he used to do in Latin class. He thought I would know the answer. She stated I recalled her dejected gaze, gazing out to sea. Despite my father's wishes, Mother informed me she was scared to send me here. She stated I probably wouldn't be able to leave once I was here. She desired for me to remain near her. "Normal," Mr. D remarked. "They are typically killed in this manner. Are you bidding or not, young man?" "What?" I inquired. I followed his impatient explanation of how to bid at Pinnacle. Chiron remarked, "I'm afraid there's too much to tell. I'm afraid our standard orientation video won't cut it." I said, "Orientation film?" Chiron said, "No." "All right, Percy. Grover, your companion, is a satyr, as you are aware. You are aware that you have slain the Minotaur," he said, pointing to the horn in the shoebox. No minor accomplishment either, boy. You could be unaware that powerful forces are at play in your life. The energies that you refer to as the Greek gods are very much alive. I gazed at everyone seated at the table. I waited for a voice to say, not. However, all I received was Mr. D shouting, "Oh, a royal marriage. Trick, trick." As he added up his points, he laughed. Grover hesitantly said, "Mr. D, may I have your Diet Coke can if you won't eat it?" Grover sobered as he chewed a large piece of the empty aluminum can. "Hold on," I said to Chiron. "You're implying that God actually exists." "All right," Chiron responded. God, capitalized G. That is a very different issue. We will not address the metaphysical. Metaphysical? However, you were just discussing. Gods, plural, as in, magnificent creatures that govern the natural forces and human activities, the everlasting gods of Olympus. That is a less serious issue. Not serious? Indeed, quite. We talked about the gods in Latin class. Zeus, I said. Hera. Apollo. You're referring to them. On a cloudless day, distant thunder appeared once more. Mr. D remarked, "Young man, if I were you, I would really be less casual about throwing those names around." I responded, "But they're stories. They are myths to explain the seasons, lightning, and other things. They are the beliefs held prior to the development of science." "Science?" Mr. D laughed. He replied, "And tell me, Persis Jackson," I winced when he spoke my own name, which I kept a secret, "and tell me, what will people think of your science in 2,000 years? Mr. D went on. "Well, they'll refer to it as primitive jargon. That's what. Yes, I adore mortals. They are completely perspectiveless. They believe they have made great progress. Chiron, have they? Tell me, look at this boy." Even though I didn't like Mr. D, there was something off about the way he referred to me as mortal, like though he wasn't. The idea of why Grover was obediently watching his cards, munching his Coke can, and keeping his mouth quiet was enough to make my throat turn. "Percy, whether you believe it or not, the fact remains that immortality entails immortality," Chiron remarked. "Can you picture never dying for a second? Never going away? Existing forever, just as you are? How would you feel about being referred to as a myth, or an ancient tale that explains lightning if you were a god? What if I told you, Persis Jackson, that one day you would be referred to as a myth, made up only to help young boys cope with the loss of their mothers?" My heart was racing. For some reason, he was attempting to enrage me, but I refused to allow it. "I wouldn't like it," I responded. "However, I reject the existence of gods." "Oh," Mr. D said, "you'd better. Before you are burned alive by one of them." Please, sir," Grover said. "His mother passed just recently. He's stunned." As he played a card, Mr. D said, "A lucky thing, too. It's bad enough that I have to work with boys who don't even believe at this dreadful job." As if the sunlight had temporarily bent and woven the air into glass, he waved his hand and a cup materialized on the table. Red wine poured into the glass itself. Chiron hardly looked up, but my mouth fell open. He cautioned, "Your limitations, Mr. D." Mr. D pretended to be surprised as he examined the wine. "To me, dear." Gazing up at the sky, he said, "Old habits. Apologies." More thunder. When Mr. D waved his hand once more, a brand new Diet Coke can replace the wineglass. With an unhappy groan, he popped the soda's lid and resumed playing cards. Chiron gave me a wink. Mr. D took a fancy to a wood nymph who had been off limits after offending his father a while back. I repeated, still gazing at the Diet Coke can as if it were from space. "A wood nymph." "Yes," Mr. D admitted. "My father enjoys punishing me. Prohibition, the first time. Horrible. What a terrible decade. He sent me here the second time because, well, she was incredibly attractive and I couldn't help myself. Blood Hill half. Brats like you can go to summer camp. Be a more positive influence," he advised me. "Work with young people instead of tearing them down." Ha! Totally unjust. Mr. D sounded like a sulking small child, perhaps 6 years old. And I stumbled, "Your dad is?" Mr. D responded, "D immortals, Chiron. I assumed you gave this boy a foundational education. Naturally, Zeus is my father." I looked up Greek mythological D names. Wine. The tiger skin. All of the satyrs appeared to be employed here. Grover winced as though Mr. D were his boss. I said, "You're Dionysus? The wine god." I said, "You're Dionysus? The wine god." Mr. D gave an eye roll. "Grover, what do they say these days? Do the kids exclaim, 'Well, duh'?" "Yes, Mr. D." "Then, of course. Jackson, Percy. Maybe you thought I was Aphrodite. You are divine." "Yes, kid. You are a god." I noticed a sort of purple fire in his eyes as he turned to face me directly, giving me the impression that this whining, fat little man was just revealing a small portion of who he really was. I saw visions of sailors screaming as their hands transformed to flippers and their faces lengthening into dolphin snouts, drunken warriors driven wild by battle lust, and great vines strangling doubters to death. I was aware that Mr. D would show me worse things if I pressed him. He would infect my brain with a disease that would keep me in a rubber room in a straitjacket for the rest of my days. "Child, would you like to test me?" he whispered softly. "No, sir. No." The fire somewhat died. He resumed playing his card game. "I think I win." "Mr. D, not quite," Chiron remarked. "The game goes to me," he declared after setting down a straight and tallying the points. "I'm worn out," Mr. D declared. "I think I'll sleep before tonight's sing-along. But first, Grover, we must discuss your subpar performance on this project once more." Grover had beads of sweat on his face. "Yes, sir." Mr. D looked across at me. "Percy Jackson, cabin 11. Also, be mindful of your etiquette." Grover followed him pathetically as he swept into the farmhouse. "Will Grover be all right?" I questioned Chiron. "Yes," said Cryon. I said, "Mount Olympus? Are you implying that there is a palace there?" "Mount Olympus is located in Greece. Then there is Mount Olympus, which was formerly the location of the gods' residence and the meeting place of their powers. The palace changes, Percy, much like the gods do, but it is still known as Mount Olympus in observance of the ancient customs." "Do you imply that the gods of Greece are present? As in America?" "Well, of course. The gods follow the Western heartbeat." "What?" "Come on, Percy. You refer to it as Western civilization. Do you believe it to be merely a theoretical idea? It is, in fact, a living force. For thousands of years, a collective consciousness has been burning brightly. The gods are involved. You could even argue that they constitute its origin, or at the very least, they are so inextricably linked to it that they cannot ever disappear unless Western civilization as a whole is destroyed. Greece was where the fire began. Then, as you are well aware, or as I hope you are, given that you completed my course, the gods and the heart of the fire relocated to Rome. Yes, sometimes with different names, Venus for Aphrodite, Jupiter for Zeus, and so forth, but the same energies and gods. The idea that I appeared to be a part of Chiron's we, as though I were a member of some club, was particularly overwhelming. "Chiron, who are you? Who am I?" Chiron grinned. I understood that he couldn't get out of his wheelchair, yet he moved his weight as though he were. His paralysis extended from his waist down. "Who am I?" he wondered. "We all want an answer to that question, don't we? We should get you a bunk in cabin 11 for the time being, though. You'll have to make new acquaintances. And tomorrow's classes will have plenty of time. In addition, I absolutely love chocolate, and tonight there will be s'mores by the campfire." He eventually got out of his wheelchair. However, there was a peculiarity in his approach. His legs remained motionless, but his blanket dropped off them. His waist continued to elongate, beyond his belt. He was taller than any male, so I initially assumed he was wearing really long, white velvet underwear, but as he continued to get up from the chair, I understood that it wasn't underwear. It was the muscle and sinew of an animal's front covered in rough, white fur. Furthermore, it wasn't a wheelchair. It was a huge box on wheels, some sort of container, and it had to have been magic since it couldn't have contained him all. A long, knobby-kneed leg with a massive polished hoof emerged. The box was then empty, just a metal shell with a few artificial human legs attached, followed by another front leg and then hindquarters. I gazed at the enormous white stallion that had just exited the wheelchair. However, my Latin teacher's upper torso was seamlessly grafted to the horse's trunk where its neck should have been. The centaur exclaimed, "What a relief. My fetlocks had gone sleepy from being cooped up in there for so long. Hurry up, Perseus Jackson. Let's get to know the other campers." We had a pleasant tour after I got over the notion that my Latin teacher was a horse, but I was cautious not to follow him. I apologize, but I did not trust Chiron's back end as much as I trusted his front end after doing Pooper Scooper patrol in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade a few times. When we were crossing the volleyball pit, Many of the campers were whispering to each other and pointing at the minotaur horn I was carrying, and they were also pointing at Issei. He was carrying a large sharp tooth. When I saw that tooth, I asked him, "Were you attacked by a shark, or something?" When I asked him that, he had an expression of being zoned out. He quickly snapped out of it, and smiled evilly and said, "A chimera." I was surprised hearing that, and hoped I never meet one. I could still hear the campers whisper, saying, "Look at those two." I was younger than the majority of the campers. Grover was dwarfed by their sadder companions, who all walked around wearing orange Camp Half-Blood t-shirts and little else to hide their exposed, shaggy rear ends. Even though I'm not usually bashful, I felt uneasy with the way they looked at me. They seemed to be anticipating a flip or something from me. I turned to face the farmhouse. It was 4 stories high, sky blue with white trim, and much larger than I had anticipated. It resembled an affluent beach resort. I was examining the brass eagle weather vane atop when I noticed a shadow in the attic gable's uppermost window. For a brief moment, someone had moved the curtain, and I could clearly feel that I was being watched. "What's up there?" I questioned Chiron. His smile vanished as he looked in the direction I was pointing. "Only the attic." "Is there anyone who lives there?" "No," he responded definitively. "No living thing at all." I sensed that he was telling the truth. However, I was also certain that something had caused that curtain to shift. With a slightly strained tone, Chiron said, "Come along, Percy. A lot to observe." While a satyr played music on a reed pipe, we strolled into the strawberry fields where campers were gathering bushels of fruit. According to Chiron, the camp produced a good crop that was exported to Mount Olympus and restaurants in New York. "It covers our costs," he clarified. "The strawberries also require very little work." "He'll have another chance, won't he, Grover?" Chiron flinched. "Regretfully, Percy, that was Grover's second opportunity. After what had transpired 5 years prior, the council was also hesitant to grant him another. Olympus is aware. I told him to hold off on attempting again. For his age, he is still quite little." "What is his age?" "Oh, 28. "What? He's in 6th grade, too?" "Percy, satyrs mature half as quickly as humans do. For the previous 6 years, Grover has been the equivalent of a middle school student." "That's unfair," I remarked. "What went wrong the first time? Was it truly that awful?" Chiron instantly averted his gaze. "Shall we proceed, shall we?" "Chiron," I murmured. "If Olympus, the gods, and everything else are real." "Yes, kid?" "Does that imply that the underworld is also real?" Chiron's face grew serious. "Yes, kid." He hesitated, as though he was picking his words carefully. "After death, spirits go to a certain place. However, I would advise you to ignore that for the time being until we get further information." "Until we know more, what do you mean?" "Come, Percy. Let's explore the forest." I became aware of the size of the forest as we approached. With trees so tall and dense that you could think no one had lived there since the Native Americans, it occupied at least 25% of the valley. "The woods are stocked, if you want to try your luck, but go armed," Chiron stated. "Stocked by what?" I inquired. "What are you armed with?" "You'll see. It is Friday night when the flag is captured. Do you own a sword and shield of your own?" "Mine?" "No," Chiron replied. "I doubt that you do. A size 5 should work, in my opinion. Later, I'll go to the armory." "Does Issei have his own shield and his sword?" When I asked that, Issei's eyes lit up as he said, "Look at this." He took out a red cylinder and a gold armband. On closer inspection, the red cylinder looked like a lighter which he squeezed. Lit on Issei's hand was covered in flames, and out of those flames came out a sword. A one-handed longsword with a blade that seems to pulse like a heartbeat. The edges of the blade glow crimson, and its fuller is engraved with a pattern of intertwining roses and thorns. The hilt is encrusted with a ruby shaped like a teardrop, glowing faintly. After Issei pulled it out, Chiron had a shocked expression, while Issei was giddy and said, "I call this blood sweep," and on the other hand came out a golden flash, almost blinding. Out a shield. The shield is a large, kite-shaped piece with a scaled texture, resembling the hide of a dragon. The rim is edged with jagged patterns that evoke dragon fangs, giving it a fierce, predatory look. At its center lies a roaring dragon head emblem, its eyes formed from glowing rubies that flicker like embers. Chiron started saying something under his breath in ancient Greek, almost as if he was praying to someone, and doing the claw motion on the heart, and pointing at Issei's weapons. I call this one Ignis Draconis. The camper were also shocked at what Issei pulled out. As we get ready for capture the flag. Percy POV. I wanted to know what kind of summer camp had an armory, but the tour went on because I had too many other things to consider. After the show Issei put on with his epic sword and shield, we continued the tour. We saw the canoeing lake, the archery range, the javelin range, the sing-along amphitheater, the stables, which Chiron didn't seem to appreciate, and the arena where, according to Chiron, sword and spear combat were held. Fights with swords and spears? I inquired. He clarified, cabin challenges and all that. Not deadly. Typically. Yes, and the mess hall is there as well. When it rains, what do you do? I inquired. Chiron regarded me as though I had become rather strange. Don't we still need to eat? I chose to end the conversation. He showed me the cabins at last. Tucked away near the lake in the woods were 12 of them. They were positioned in a U shape, with 5 in a row on either side and 2 at the base. And these were unquestionably the strangest group of structures I had ever seen. As I turned back to look at Issei, I saw him going off to a cabin, and I chose not to comment on it. They didn't resemble one another at all, save for the fact that each had a big brass number over the door, evens on the right, odds on the left. The smokestacks at number 9 resembled a small factory. The roof of number 4 was composed of genuine grass, and the walls were covered with tomato vines. It was nearly impossible to look at 7 since it appeared to be composed of solid gold that shines so brightly in the sunlight. Each of them faced a common space roughly the size of a soccer field, with fountains, flower beds, Greek statues, and a few basketball hoops, which I preferred. A massive campfire surrounded by stones stood in the middle of the field. The hearth smoldered despite the warm afternoon. Using a stick to poke the coals, a 9-year-old girl was tending to the fire. Numbers 1 and 2, the 2 cabins at the head of the field, resembled his and hers mausoleums. They were large white marble boxes with hefty columns in front. Out of the 12, cabin 1 was the largest and most substantial. Lightning bolts appeared to flash over its shiny bronze doors from various angles as they shimmered like a hologram. In other ways, cabin 2 was more elegant, including slimmer columns adorned with flowers and pomegranates. Peacock pictures were carved into the walls. Hera and Zeus? I speculated. That's right, Chiron said. Their cabins appear to be vacant. There are several cabins that are. It's accurate. Never does anyone remain in 1 or 2. All right. As a result, each cabin had a mascot or other deity. For the 12 Olympians, there were 12 cabins. Why would some be vacant, though? I came to a stop in front of cabin 3, which is the first cabin on the left. It was long, low, and sturdy instead of lofty and powerful like cabin 1. The exterior walls were made of rough gray stone that was dotted with coral and seashell fragments, giving the impression that the slabs had been cut directly from the ocean floor. Chiron remarked, "Oh, I wouldn't do that," as I peered through the open doorway. Like the breeze on the beach in Montauk, I smelled the salty interior before he could drag me back. The inside walls had an abalone-like shimmer. Campers were packed into most of the other cottages. The paint job on number 5 was really terrible, looking like it had been splattered on with buckets and fists. It was brilliant red. Barbed wire ran the length of the roof. The eyes of a stuffed wild boar appeared to follow me as its head hung over the entryway. As rock music played, I could see a group of ugly children, both boys and girls, fighting and arm wrestling with one another inside. 6 bunk beds were unoccupied, the silk sheets folded. Nevertheless, there was no indication that anyone had ever slept there. I was relieved when Chiron put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Come along, Percy," because the location felt so depressing and lonely. A girl, perhaps 13 or 14, was the loudest. She had on a camouflage jacket over a size XXXL Camp Half-Blood t-shirt. She sneered evilly at me as she focused on me. Although the camper girl was considerably larger and tougher looking, and her hair was long and stringy, brown rather than red, she reminded me of Nancy Bobo Fit. I continued to walk while avoiding Chiron's hoofs. I said, "We haven't seen any other centaurs." "No," Chiron sadly replied. "I fear that my kinsmen are a savage and untamed people. They may appear at important athletic events or in the outdoors. However, there won't be any here." "You mentioned that Chiron was your name. Really, are you?" He grinned at me from below. "The Chiron described in the tales? Hercules' trainer and everything? I am Percy." "However, shouldn't you be deceased?" As though intrigued by the question, Chiron hesitated. "To be honest, I'm not sure what should be. To be honest, I can't be dead. You see, my dream was fulfilled by the gods ages ago. I could keep doing what I loved. As long as they needed me, I could teach heroes. I gave up a lot and gained a lot from that wish. However, because I'm still here, I can only presume that I'm still required. For 3,000 years, I considered becoming a teacher. I wouldn't have included it on my list of the top 10 things I wish I had. He remarked, "Oh, look. Annabeth is here to greet us." In front of number 11, the final cabin on the left, the blonde girl I had met at the big house was reading a book. She gave me a critical look as we got to her, as if she was still considering how much I drooled. "I have master's archery class at noon," Annabeth, Chiron remarked. "From here, would you take Percy?" "Yes, sir." Chiron pointed to the doorway and described it to me as cabin 11. "Establish yourself at home." 11 of the cabins had the most authentic appearance of a typical old summer camp cabin, with a strong emphasis on aging. The brown paint on the threshold was peeling, and it was worn down. One of the doctor's insignia, a pole with wings and 2 snakes coiled around it, was visible over the doorway. What was the name given to it? A caduceus. There were far more individuals inside than there were bunk beds, both boys and females. The floor was littered with sleeping bags. The Red Cross had set up an evacuation center in what appeared to be a gym. Chiron stayed out. He couldn't reach the door. However, the campers all stood and bowed politely upon seeing him. I watched the children from the doorway. They had stopped bowing. They were observing me intently. I was familiar with this pattern. I had experienced it in enough schools. But in the middle of everybody, one boy familiar to me daced forward. He was Issei. He looked happy for a guy who just abandoned me in middle of the tour. "Percy Jackson, meet cabin 11, declared Annabeth. "Undetermined or regular?" someone inquired. I was at a loss for words, but Annabeth said, "Undetermined." Everyone let out a moan. One man, slightly older than the others, stepped forward. "Come on, campers. That is the reason we are here. Percy and Issei, welcome. That area on the floor, over there, is both yours." He was about 19 years old and had a cool appearance. He had short, sandy hair, a warm smile, and a tall, strong build. He accessorized with sandals, cutoffs, an orange tank top, and a leather necklace adorned with 5 distinct colored clay beads. His deep white scar, which resembled an old knife slice and extended from just under his right eye to his jaw, was the only troubling aspect of his appearance. Annabeth said, "This is Luke," and her voice seemed to sound different in some way. I could swear she was blushing as I looked over. Her countenance tightened once more when she noticed that I was watching. "For now, he serves as your counselor." "For now?" I said. "You're not sure," Luke explained calmly. "You're here because they're unsure of which cabin to place you in. All guests and newcomers are sent to cabin 11. Of course we would. The deity of travels, Hermes, is our patron." I examined the small area of the floor they had provided. I didn't have any clothes, baggage, or a sleeping bag to identify it as mine. Only the horn of the Minotaur. Before I remembered that Hermes was also the god of thieves, I considered writing that down. "How much time will I be here?" I inquired. "Nice query," Luke remarked. "Until you're resolute." "How much time will that take?" Every camper chuckled. Annabeth said, "Come on. Take a look at the volleyball court." "I've already seen it." "Come on." She took hold of my wrist and pulled me out. Behind me, I could hear the laughter of the children in cabin 11. "Jackson, you have to do better than that," Annabeth exclaimed as we were just a few steps away. "What's wrong with you?" I was now becoming irate. "I only know that I killed a bully." "Stop talking like that," I was told by Annabeth. "Do you know how many of the children at this camp wish they had your opportunity? To die? In order to battle the Minotaur. For what do you believe we train?" I gave a headshake. "Look, if the Minotaur I actually battled was the same one from the myths." "Yes." "So there's just one?" "Yes." "He passed away a long time ago, isn't that correct? He was killed by Theseus in the labyrinth." "Like you and I, they are soulless. For a while, perhaps even a lifetime if you're lucky, you can dispel them. However, they are primordial forces. According to Chiron, they are archetypes. They eventually reorganize." I considered Mrs. Dodds. "You mean if I accidentally used a sword to kill one?" "The furrier math teacher, that is." "Yes, exactly. She's not gone yet." "She was just furious with you." "How were you made aware of Mrs. Dodds?" "You speak while you're asleep." Annabeth looked at the earth anxiously, as though she thought it would split open and engulf her. "Even here, you shouldn't address them by name." If we must mention them at all, we refer to them as the kindly ones. Can we say anything without it thundering, you see? Even I thought I sounded whining, but at the time, I didn't mind. In any case, why must I remain in cabin 11? Why is everyone crammed into one area? There are many of vacant bunks over there. Annabeth went pale when I indicated the first several cabins. Percy, you don't just pick a cabin. Your parents' personalities will determine this. Or your parent. Annabeth stared at me saying you always have a godly parent, and a mortal parent. Your mom was a human, but dad we don't know anything about. But my dad is dead, he was lost at sea. Annabeth let out a sigh. She had obviously had this discussion with other children previously. Percy, your father is still alive. How are you able to say that? Do you know him? No, obviously not. So how do you say? I know you, that's why. If you weren't one of us, you wouldn't be here. You know absolutely nothing about me. No? She arched an eyebrow. You must have moved from one school to another. You must have been expelled from many of them. How? Dyslexia has been identified. Most likely ADHD as well. I made an effort to hide my shame. What is there any connection between that and anything? When combined, it's practically a guarantee. When you read, don't the letters seem to float off the page? Your mind is hardwired for ancient Greek, which explains why. Additionally, you have ADHD, you can't sit still in class and are impulsive. That's your reflexes on the battlefield. They would keep you alive in a genuine battle. Percy, you see too much, not too little, which is the reason of your attention have more senses than the average mortal. Naturally, the teachers want you to take medication. They are monsters for the most part. They do not want you to see them for who they really are. You seem to have experienced the same thing. The majority of the children here did. You couldn't have survived the Minotaur, let alone the ambrosia and nectar, if you weren't like us. Nectar and ambrosia. We were providing you food and drink to help you feel better. A typical child would have died from that stuff. Your bones would have turned to sand, your blood to fire, and you would have perished. Admit it. You have half-blood ties. Half-blood? I had so many questions that I was at a loss for where to begin. Then a deep voice said, "All right. A novice." I turned to look. The large female from the unsightly red cottage was strolling in our direction. Behind her were 3 more girls in camouflage coats, all of them large, ugly, and mean-looking like her. Clarice, sighed Annabeth. Would you mind going to clean your spear or something? The older girl said, "Yes, Miss Princess. So that on Friday night, I can go over it with you." Yes, Caracas. I thought Annabeth's statement, which I somehow deduced was Greek meaning go to the crows, was actually a more sinister curse than it seemed. You're not going to succeed. Clarice said, "We'll grind you to dust," but her eye twitched. She might not have been certain that she could carry out the threat. She turned to face me. Who is this small runt? Annabeth introduced Percy Jackson to Clarice, the daughter of Ares. I blinked. The war god, perhaps? Clarice gave a smirk. Is there something wrong with that? No, I answered, gathering my courage. It clarifies the unpleasant odor. Clarice snarled. Percy, we had a newbie initiation ceremony. Percy. Anyway. I'll show you, come on. Clarice, Annabeth attempted to produce. Wise girl, stay out of it. Although Annabeth appeared distressed, she remained detached, and I wasn't particularly in need of her assistance. The new child was me. My reputation has to be earned. I prepared to fight after giving Annabeth my minotaur horn, but before I knew it, Clarice had me by the neck and was pulling me in the direction of a cinderblock structure that I instantly recognized as the restroom. One side had a row of restrooms, while the other side had a row of shower booths. As much as I could think while Clarice was tearing my hair out, I was thinking that if this location belonged to the gods, they should have been able to purchase classier johns because it smelled just like any public restroom. Clarice's friends were all laughing, and suddenly I heard a voice, "What are you doing to my buddy?" When I looked over, it was Issei as 2 of the Clarice's friends charged towards him, but Issei single-handedly pushed them back with no effort. I tried to summon the strength I had while I was fighting the Minotaur, but nothing happened. But I heard Clarice growl, "And are these 2 supposed to be Big 3 material?" Clarice started forcing my head towards the toilet water. I looked over at Issei. He was occupied with Clarice's friends also, and Beth was just looking at me with interest, and at that something snapped inside me. I felt the rage. I was going to push back, but something else happened as the water from the toilet bowl shot up at Clarice and washed all of her friends, while Issei knowingly dodged it. Her pals began to approach her as she struggled and gasped. However, 6 additional streams of toilet water shot them back after the other toilets erupted as well. The camouflage females were spun around like trash being washed away by the showers, which also acted up and sprayed them out of the restroom as a whole. It flooded the whole bathroom. Annabeth was not exempt. Despite being drenched, she had not been forced out the door. She was standing in the same spot, looking at me with disbelief. I became aware that I was seated in the only dry area of the room when I looked down. I was surrounded by a dry circle of floor. Not a single drop of water was on my clothing. Nothing. With unsteady legs, I got to my feet. Then Annabeth said, "How did?" "I'm not sure." We made our way to the door. Several other campers had gathered to observe Clarice and her companions as they were sprawled in the dirt outside. Clarice's face had her hair flattened. She smelled like sewage, and her camouflage jacket was soaking. She looked at me with utter contempt. "New boy, you are dead. You're completely dead." I should have probably let it go, but I said, "Clarice, would you like to gargle with toilet water once more? Keep your mouth shut." She had to be restrained by her buddies. The other campers moved aside to escape her flailing feet as they pulled her toward cabin 5. Annabeth gave me a look. I couldn't tell if she was upset with me for dousing her or just grossed out. "What?" I insisted. "What are you contemplating?" "I am thinking that I want you on my team for Capture the Flag." I see POV. When I saw Percy getting dragged to the bathroom by 4 big girls, I knew he was in trouble as I went in the bathroom and waited a while to make my heroic entrance. I saw a girl named Clarice who looked eerily similar to Deborah try and push Percy's head down the toilet bowl so to save my new friend. I called out to them, and as they looked at me startled they charged at me, and of course I easily took care of them. Didn't even need my weapons for them, just hand-to-hand combat as Percy just summoned a huge water stream from the toilet as I smiled and weaved as not a single drop of water stained my red shirt. The training Deborah and Aram put me through was tough, but effective. Some time later, news of the bathroom incident quickly spread. Campers muttered something about toilet water everywhere I walked and pointed at me. Perhaps they were simply focusing on Annabeth, who was still essentially dripping wet. She also showed me and Percy the arts and crafts room, where satyrs were sandblasting a huge marble statue of a goat man, the metal shop, where children were making their own swords, and the climbing wall, which was made up of 2 facing walls that shook violently, dropped boulders, sprayed lava, and collided if you didn't reach the top quickly enough. The trail eventually led us back to the cabins at the canoeing lake. "I have to train," Annabeth stated bluntly. "Dinner is served at 7:30. To go to the mess hall, simply follow your cabin." As Percy was apologizing to Annabeth, I smelled some good barbecue, and of course, I followed the smell and saw a few people from Athena and Demeter's cabin cooking barbecue. So I went up to a tall, good-looking man with a scar on his face named Luke. He looked at me and said, "Hey newbie, you should head to cabin 11. We are going to start the newbie ceremony for you and Percy." I said yes without a second thought. When I went back to cabin 11, I saw Percy while Luke went off to other campers. Percy came up to me with his minotaur horn in hand. It looked like he got a souvenir from his fight. He asked me, "Hey Issei, do you know what an oracle is?" Annabeth said I should talk to her. "Also, don't you feel a little out of place? We came here at the same time. Why do you look so relaxed?" he asked, but before I could respond, Luke, the counselor, arrived. He also resembled members of the Hermes family. His smile was still there, but it was tarnished by that scar on his right cheek. He said, "I found you a sleeping bag. And I took some toiletries from the camp store and put them here." Regarding the theft portion, I couldn't tell if he was kidding. "Thanks," I said, while Percy smiled at him. "No problem." Luke leaned his back against the wall and sat beside me. "Hard first day." "I don't belong here. I don't even think that there are gods," said Percy. "Yes," he said. "That's where we all began. After you begin to have faith in them, it doesn't become any simpler." I was taken aback by the hostility in his voice because Luke appeared like a laid-back man. He seems capable of handling almost anything. I said, "So your dad is Hermes?" I briefly believed he was going to slit my throat when he took a switchblade from his back pocket, but all he did was scrape the mud off the sole of his sandal. "Indeed. Hermes. The nimble messenger man. That's him. Messengers. Medication. Travelers, traders, and robbers. Every person that drives. You guys are coming to enjoy the hospitality of Cabin 11 for that reason. Hermes doesn't have a discerning taste in sponsors. Luke didn't mean to call me and Percy a nobody, I assumed. He was just thinking about some things. Have you met your father? Percy asked. Once. I waited, assuming he would tell me if he felt like it. It seems like he didn't. I questioned whether the story had anything to do with the scar he received. Luke forced a smile as he looked up. Percy, don't worry about it. Most of the campers here are decent individuals. We are extended family, after all. We look out for one another. Percy decided to ask him the final, important question that had been on my mind all afternoon. Aries Clarice was making a joke about me being Big 3 material. Then Annabeth remarked that I might be the one twice. She advised me to speak with the oracle. What was the purpose of that? Luke put his knife away. I hate prophecies. What do you mean? The scar made his face tremble. Let's just say that I caused trouble for everyone else. Chiron hasn't permitted any more adventures for the past 2 years, ever since my visit to the Garden of the Hesperides ended badly. Annabeth has been itching to leave the house. Chiron finally told her that he already knew her fate because she had been bugging him so long. The oracle had given him a prophecy. Although he wouldn't tell her everything, he claimed that Annabeth wasn't yet meant to embark on a quest. She was forced to wait until a special visitor arrived at the camp. Someone unique? Luke said, don't worry about it, kid. Every new camper that passes through here is seen by Aunt Beth as the sign she has been waiting for. Come on, it's time for dinner. A distant horn blew as soon as he finished speaking. Despite the fact that I had never heard of a conch shell before, I somehow knew it was one. Fall in, 11! Shouted Luke. About 20 of us from the cabin filed into the commons yard. Since we were arranged according to seniority, I was obviously dead last. With the exception of the 3 vacant cabins at the end and cabin 8, which had appeared normal during the day but was now beginning to glow silver as the sun set, campers also arrived from the other cabins. To go to the mess hall pavilion, we marched up the hill. Satyrs came from the meadow to join us. From the canoeing lake came the naiads. A couple of other girls emerged from the trees, and I mean literally, right out of the woods. I witnessed a girl, who was maybe 9 or 10 years old, come skipping up the hill after melting from the side of a maple tree. A dozen different wood nymphs and naiads, a few dozen satyrs, and perhaps 100 campers were present. Around the marble columns in the pavilion, flames burned. In a bathtub-sized bronze brazier, a core fire was burning. Every cabin featured a table with a purple-trimmed white cloth covering it. Although there were 4 empty seats, the 11th table was extremely full. With half of my butt hanging off, I had to cling to a bench's edge. With her honey blonde hair and gray eyes, Annabeth sat at table 6 with a group of serious-looking sporty kids. Everyone grew hushed as Chiron finally stomped his hoof against the pavilion's marble floor. He held up a glass. To the gods. Everyone else's glasses went up. To the gods. Wood nymphs appeared carrying trays of food, including cheese, fresh bread, apples, strawberries, grapes, and yes, barbecue. Luke said, talk to it, even though my glass was empty. Anything you like, as long as it's not booze. Melon soda, I said, while Percy called out, tea cherry coke. Then I heard Percy call out blue cherry coke. By the way, I have been thinking about this for a while. What's Percy's obsession with color blue? He even smells like the sea. What's up with that? As I approached, I noticed that each person was taking a piece of their food, the warmest, butteriest bun, the ripest strawberry, or the juiciest piece of beef, and throwing it into the fire. Luke whispered in my ear, offer sacrifices to the gods. They enjoyed the scent. I couldn't help but wonder why an all-powerful, immortal entity would enjoy the scent of burning food, but his expression cautioned me not to take this lightly. Luke walked over to the fire, bent down, and threw in a bunch of fatty red grapes. Hermes. Next was me. I knew what god's name I had to say, so I said Aphrodite. After me was Percy. Mr. D sighed deeply and stood up. Yes, I guess I should greet each and every one of you brats. All right, hi. The next capture the flag is scheduled for Friday, according to Chiron, our activities director. At the moment, Cabin 5 is the winner. From the Aries table came a bundle of hideous cheering roses. Congratulations, Mr. D added, but I couldn't care less. I should also mention that today we have 2 new campers. Peter Johnson and Ice Hido. Percy Jackson and Issei Hayadu, Mr. D clarified. That's correct. All that and hurrah. Run to your dumb campfire now. Proceed. Everyone applauded. We all made our way to the amphitheater, where a sing-along was hosted by Apollo's cabin. We laughed about, ate mores, and sang camp songs about the gods. What was interesting was that I stopped feeling like people were looking at me. I had a sense of home. I looked over at Percy and had a feeling that he felt the same way. The conch trumpet blasted one more later in the evening when the campfire's sparks were curling into a starry sky, and we all filed back to our cabins. It wasn't until I passed out on my borrowed sleeping bag that I realized how tired I was. As I went to sleep, I wondered who my parent was because the theory of Aram was I was son of a minor god, a son of Aphrodite, he will be my parent, but who? When I first woke up I was greeted by Annabeth and the first question from her mouth was, "Is it you?" But not even 30 minutes later Cryan came up to me and we talked for a bit before I gave him a note from Aram. Looking at that note, Cryan just sighed and said his goodbye. As I went to sleep and concluded my first day at the camp. But then I heard PSSSTIC. I looked where the sound came from and it was Percy. He looked at me and asked, "How did your first day go, and why did you leave?" When Cryan was giving us a tour of the place I looked at him and said, "Oh, nothing, I saw something shining and followed it." "You are ADHD brains," said Percy. "Don't you feel weird here, and do you seriously believe that we are demigods?" "Yes, Percy, I do believe in it." "Didn't your Satori say anything?" Percy just nodded no, so I told him, "Percy, we have to accept who we are. Isn't your mom named Sally Jackson?" Percy looked a bit down but nodded yes. "Okay, so you are Sally's son but also a son of God and you have to accept that, and plus you are not alone, you have and Luke." Percy looked at me. "And do you know who your godly parent is?" I said no. After a while Percy went to sleep and so did I. Next few days felt like I was on the ship again because me, Percy, and with the other campers were getting lessons from satyrs, nymphs and centaurs. Each morning me, Percy, and I took ancient Greek classes from Annabeth and talked about gods and goddesses. The rest of the day, Percy and I tried to do outdoor activities we were good at the first, which was archery. So Percy and I made it a competition in archery. The first time I touched a bow I felt amazing, like everything was under my command. When I shot it, even the Apollo kids were shocked. I shot 6 arrows all hitting the same target without missing, and when Percy tried it he was horrendous at it. He almost hit Chiron. Foot racing, and again I was faster than him, but not by much as I trained with Deborah and Aram, but someone was faster than us, and they were the wood nymphs. They assured us it was nothing to worry about. They had practiced fleeing from lovesick gods for centuries. Being slower than a tree was still a little embarrassing. Wrestling again, I was better than Percy, but I also had to fight Claire Eyes and she was a troublesome foe. After I slammed her again for picking on Percy, me and him went up to the canoeing area. Percy was better than me at canoeing, but in the middle of us canoeing, he looked at me and says, "Do you feel like we are being stared at?" I said, "Yes, Percy, you defeated Minotaur on your first day and I defeated a chimera I was, and then we outperformed some of the campers in the foot race, so of course we are getting stared at." I was aware that the counselors and older campers were observing me and attempting to identify our parents, but they weren't having a good time. I wasn't as proficient at archery as the Apollo kids or as strong as the Ares kids. I lacked Hephaestus's aptitude for metalworking and, heaven forbid, Dionysus's talent for vine plants. For Percy, they were trying to find his father, to which Luke said it might be Hermes. For me, I never said to which my parent, who I grew up with because of strict orders from Aram, the only one who was Chiron. I still started to enjoy the camp as the outdoor activities were so much fun, but then all good things must come to an end, as I remembered I would have to go home during summer vacations back to my mom's house, or I will stay here a year long like Annabeth, maybe, who knows. I overthink a lot. 3 days after arriving at Camp Half-Blood, I got my first sword fighting instruction on Thursday afternoon. In the large circular stadium, where Luke would serve as our instructor, everyone from Cabin 11 assembled. Using some straw-stuffed dummies in Greek armor, we began with simple stabbing and slicing techniques. I was a bit better than most people there, as only 2 other people stood out. It was Annabeth, of course, since her mother was Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, and Percy, as his sword skill were a bit better than being called mediocre, but the best one there was Luke. His skills were amazing. I think he might be even better than Deborah at sword fighting. When moved on to dueling, I saw Percy and Luke dueling, while one the camper shouted out, "Good luck, Luke's the best swordsman in the camp." Then, it being as Luke demonstrated his skill with the sword, I was amazed that I'd never seen such a masterclass swordsman in my life, but Percy was also quickly adapting to the sword fighting skills. When it was my turn, a camper from Apollo Cabin was my partner. He was a challenge. He pushed me back a couple times as his slashes were powerful and fast. I barely managed to draw victory because I pointed and said, "Look, a golden elephant," and he looked. That was enough for me to headbutt him to the floor. By the time it was break, I had won over 2 times the guy from Apollo's Cabin. My first partner, his name was Orion Lyra. He was same age as me but a bit taller with blonde curly hair and tan skin. He came up to me and said, "That was a neat trick, can't believe I feel for it." He's sorry for that, I couldn't have beaten you otherwise, I said. We just shook our hands and went separate ways, with both having mutual respect for each other. Then, later Luke demonstrated the disarming technique on Percy as Luke kept disarming Percy as I saw his pupils dilate a bit as he tried the disarming maneuver as his blade hit Luke's and Percy rotated it as Luke's sword fell to the ground, and all the other campers were silent before erupting in enjoyment. But when they tried again, Luke sent Percy's sword flying when the campers said beginner's luck. Friday afternoon. It was me, Orion, Percy, and his sadder friend, Grover. We were resting near the lake. Percy had dipped his feet knee-high in the lake's water, as he was recovering from getting a bit burnt from lava in wall climbing. His friend was pretty cool. His name was Grover. He was able to climb the wall with no problem at all. I can imagine Aram doing the same thing. When it was me and Orion's turn, we made it into a bet, well, at least betting who would take over to scoop the poop of the Pegasus whelp. That was a sorry bet since I lost. Suddenly, Percy's question made Grover's face sickly yellow. I didn't hear the question, but it was funny to see Grover look like that. Then I heard Grover say Mr. D put his judgment on hold. He claimed that since I hadn't yet failed or succeeded with you, our fates were still intertwined. Perhaps you would consider the job done if you had a quest and I had accompanied you to protect you and we both returned alive. Blah ha ha. He might as well have put me on cleaning duty at the stable. The likelihood that you will receive a quest, and why would you want me to accompany you even if you did? I would definitely want you to go. He looked even more wretched when I tried to comfort him by telling him that he had many talents. After discussing the benefits and drawbacks of the various gods, we spent some time discussing canoeing and swordplay. I finally questioned him about the 4 unoccupied cabins. Artemis owns number 8, the silver one, he declared. She promised to always be a maiden. No children, of course. You know, the cabin is a place of honor. She would be upset if she didn't have one. Yes, all right. However, the final 3. Do those represent the big 3? Grover stiffened. We were approaching a sensitive topic. No. The second one is Hera's, he stated. That is an additional honor. Naturally, she wouldn't go about having affairs with mortals because she is the goddess of marriage. Her husband does that. The 3 strong brothers who were Kronos' sons are referred to as the big 3. Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus. All right. You are aware. They seized the globe from their father following the epic conflict with the Titans, and they used a drawing to determine who would get what. The sky was given to Zeus, I recalled. Hades is the underworld, Poseidon is the sea. Yeah. But here, Hades doesn't have a cabin. Well, that's kind of sad, isn't it? Orion chirped into the conversation. Do you know Percy? I see he doesn't even have a throne on Olympus, he just his own thing. Then I was about to ask how many years has he been here, but that's when Percy asked how many years have you been here, Orion, and he just responded I have been since I was 8 years old, as he shows all of a necklace with 4 beads on them. However, in the tales, Zeus and Poseidon each had an enormous number of children. Their cabins are empty. Why? Asked Percy. Grover moved uneasily on his hoofs. Some 60 years ago, following World War II, the Big 3 decided to stop producing heroes. Simply put, their kids were too strong. They were generating too much havoc and too much influence over human history. The Second World War was essentially a conflict between the sons of Hades, Zeus, and Poseidon. Hades was forced to make a promise with Zeus and Poseidon, the victorious side, that they would not have any further affairs with mortal women. On the river Styx, they all took an oath. There was a boom of thunder. That's the most serious oath you can make, I said. Grover gave a nod. And the brothers didn't have any children as promised? Grover's expression grew serious. Zeus fell off the wagon 17 years ago. He couldn't help himself. There was this TV personality with a large, fluffy hairstyle from the 1980s. Upon the birth of their kid, a young girl named Talia, pledges are taken seriously by the river Styx. Because he is eternal, Zeus himself got off easy, but he brought his daughter a dreadful fate. Guys, can we stop talking? Talia said. Orion, she lived in the camp for 2 years before, and he trailed off. Both Grover and Orion stayed silent before Grover started speaking again. Children of the Big 3 possess abilities that are superior to those of other half-bloods, Percy. Monsters are drawn to their potent aura and aroma. Hades was upset that Zeus had broken his pledge when he learned about the girl. Hades allowed the most terrifying creatures from Tartarus to torture Talia. When she was 12, a satyr was tasked with keeping her safe, but he was powerless to help. Along with a few other half-bloods she had made friends with, he attempted to lead her here. They nearly succeeded. They made it to the very top of the hill. He gestured toward the pine tree where I had engaged the Minotaur across the valley. A swarm of hellhounds and all 3 of the kindly ones were pursuing them. Talia instructed her satyr to save the other two half-bloods as she repelled the approaching monsters as they were about to be swamped. She didn't want to live like a hunted animal because she was exhausted and injured. The satyr didn't want to part from her, but he had to keep the others safe and couldn't make her change her mind. At the summit of that hill, Talia made her last stand by herself. Zeus felt sorry for her as she passed away. That pine tree is what he made her into. The valley's boundaries are still guarded by her soul. The hill is known as Half-Blood Hill for this reason. When I looked at Percy, I knew something had broken inside him as I could see tears coming from his eyes as he rubbed them out. Then Percy asked Grover, have heroes really gone into the underworld? On occasion, he said. Orpheus, Hercules, Houdini. And have they ever brought someone back from the grave? No. Never. Orpheus was close. You're not really thinking, Percy. Nope, said Percy. There was a lot more excitement than normal that evening after supper. Finally, the moment has come to seize the flag. We all stood at our tables as the conch trumpet blew after the plates had been cleared away. As Annabeth and two of her siblings ran into the pavilion with a silk flag, the campers shouted and yelled. Glistening gray and roughly 10 feet long, it featured a painting of a barn owl perched above an olive tree. Clarice and her friends dashed in from the other side of the pavilion, carrying a second banner, this one the same size but garishly red, adorned with a boar's head and a bloodied spear. I turned to Orion and said, are those the flags? Yes, they are, said Orion. The teams are always led by Ares and Athena? Not all the time, he said. But frequently. So, do you repaint the flag if another cabin catches one? He smiled. You'll see. We must first obtain one. Which side do we support? We might not even be on the same side. I see, we must see first. Then I looked at Percy, and he looked at OU slyly, as though he was aware of something I was not. In the torchlight, the scar on his face gave him an almost malevolent appearance. We have formed a short-term partnership with Athena. Ares gives us the flag tonight. And you're going to assist. The teams were revealed. The two largest staterooms, Apollo and Hermes, had formed an alliance with Athena. It seems that in order to get support, privileges like shower times, chore schedules, and the optimum times for activities had been exchanged. Ares had formed alliances with Hephaestus, Dionysus, Demeter, and Aphrodite. There were only 2 of Dionysus's children, but based on what I had observed, they were both talented athletes. Although they weren't particularly violent, Demeter's children had an advantage in outdoor activities and natural abilities. I wasn't too concerned about Aphrodite's children. They sat out most of the activities, gossiped, did their hair, and looked at their reflections in the lake. Well, of course they did, since they were really pretty, and of course I will try to look cool myself and at least try to get a girlfriend for my goal, and of course it is to be a harem king. Capture the flag might be the start. Also, there were only 4 of Hephaestus's children, and they weren't particularly attractive, but they were large and strong from spending all day at the metal shop. They could be an issue. Naturally, a dozen of the largest, ugliest, and cruelest children on Long Island, or any place else on the planet, left Ares's cabin. Chiron struck the marble with his hoof. Heroes! He exclaimed. You are aware of the guidelines. The borderline is the brook. It's fair game throughout the jungle. You can use any magic item. There must be no more than 2 guards and the banner must be clearly visible. Inmates may not be gagged or bound, but they may be disarmed. Killing and maiming are prohibited. I'll be the battlefield medic and referee. Arm yourselves. As he spread his hands, a flurry of equipment appeared on the tables, including helmets, metal-coated oxhide shields, spears, and bronze swords. Whoa, Percy exclaimed. Are these meant to be used? After hearing that, Luke put me, Percy, and Orion on border patrol while saying something about being skewered by Cabin 5. Annabeth shouted, Go, blue team! As we followed her down the trail to the south woods, we shook our swords and cheered. As they made their way to the north, the red team taunted us. I just see Percy running to Annabeth, but she just kept marching forward without stopping. Later we got positioned near a little creek and then Percy turned to us and said while the other team was disappearing in the forest, watch out for Clarice's spear. That's what Annabeth told me. The conch trumpet blasted far away. In the woods I heard cries and whoops, metal clanking, and children fighting. An Apollo comrade with blue plumage sprinted past me like a deer, jumped across the creek, and vanished into enemy territory. They were being led by Orion. ICPOV. As the game began, Percy and I heard a canine growl, but it was just low enough to be inaudible, so only we heard it. Sensing something bad was going to happen, Percy puts up his shield while I bring out Blood Sweep. The underbrush exploded on the other side of the creek. Out of the shadows, 8 Ares warriors screamed and yelled. "Cream the punks," yelled Clarice. In my eyes, she was screaming like a chihuahua. Out of the 8 Ares campers, only 3 of them were worrying because I knew they were here for a long time, as looking at their necklaces gave it away. They were all wielding a standard bronze sword, not like me, though. And Clarice was wielding a spear. The first camper charged without warning. The camper swung her sword down, but Issei raised his blade just in time. Sparks flew as metal met metal. He grunted, pushed back from the force, but he held his ground. He ducked under the next swing and slashed low, his blade catching the camper's leg armor. She stumbled back, cursing. Then the second camper was on him. Issei barely turned before the club cracked against Ignis Draconis, his golden shield. The dragon head shield on his left hand had transformed just in time. His arm went numb from the impact, but the shield absorbed most of the blow. Its surface pulsed with draconic fire, the veins glowing brighter. "Okay," Issei muttered. "Your turn." He grabbed the chain around his belt, binding flame, and yanked it loose. With a hiss, the fire-forged links unraveled into a full weapon. The second Ares camper lunged again. Issei snapped the chain forward. It wrapped around the guy's ankle and burst into flame. "Whoa, hot!" the camper yelped, hopping as he tried to stomp it out. The first camper came back at Issei, her sword raised. Issei parried her strike with blood sweep and the blade responded with a short burst of heat that flared along the edge. He pressed forward, slashing and pivoting, but he was tiring fast. These kids were older. Stronger. He wasn't going to last much longer. Then he heard a branch crack. The third Ares camper had circled behind him. Issei turned too slow. He was tackled from behind, crashing into the dirt. The air flew from his lungs. The other 2 closed in. The camper pinning him growled, pressing a knee into Issei's back. "This is what happens when babies play war," he said. "Percy POV. One of her siblings said, "Yeah? But you see, the flag doesn't matter to us. The individual who made our cabin appear foolish is someone we care about," said the Ares camper. "I told them, you do that on your own." Most likely, it wasn't the best thing to say. I was attacked by 2 of them. I attempted to lift my shield as I retreated toward the brook, but Clarice was too quick. I was struck squarely in the ribcage by her spear. I'd have been shish kebab if I hadn't been wearing an armored breastplate. The electrifying point about knocked my teeth out of my mouth as it was. My arm was slashed by one of her cabin mates with a sword, leaving a sizable cut. "No maiming," was all I could manage. "Sorry," the man said. "I guess I'm no longer eligible for dessert." I landed with a splash after he shoved me into the creek. They all chuckled. I assumed I would pass away as soon as they had finished amusing themselves. Then, however, something took place. As though I had just consumed a bag of my mother's double espresso jelly beans, the water appeared to awaken my senses. I got up to greet Clarice and her cabin mates as they came into the creek to pick me up. I was aware of what to do. I struck the first guy's head with the flat of my sword, completely removing his helmet in the process. As he collapsed into the water, I could see his eyes quivering from the force of my blow. I was confronted by ugly numbers 2 and 3. I cut off the other man's horsehair plume with my sword after slamming one in the face with my shield. They both quickly retreated. Despite ugly number 4's lack of aggression, Clarice continued to approach, her spear point sizzling with enthusiasm. I snapped the shaft like a twig as soon as she thrust, catching it between my sword and shield's edge. She cried out, "Ah! You fool! You corpse worm breath!" She most likely would have said worse, but I gave her a sword butt slap in the eyes, sending her reeling back out of the situation. As I heard it, Issei POV. "I'm not done," he rasped. The Ares camper laughed. That's when Ignis Draconis flared. A blast of flame erupted from the shield, knocking the camper off his back. Issei rolled and scrambled to his feet, half crawling. His whole body ached. Then I saw Luke sprinting toward the boundary line with the red team's banner up high, followed by shouting and joyful yells. A few Apollos were fending off the Hephaestus children behind him, while a few of Hermes' men covered his retreat on either side. Clarice mumbled a hazy curse as the Ares people stood up. "A trick!" she exclaimed. "It was a ruse." It was too late when they stumbled after Luke. As Luke dashed into friendly territory, everyone gathered on the creek. Our group burst into applause. The red banner transformed to silver and shimmered. The enormous caduceus, which represents cabin 11, took the place of the boar and spear. Luke was lifted up and carried about on the shoulders of every member of the blue team. Blowing the conch horn, Chiron cantered out of the trees. I looked at Clarice and said it wasn't a trick or a ruse, it was your selfish arrogance that led to your downfall. Why you? As Clarice pointed her broken spear at me. I ignored her and went to see how Percy was doing. He was panting a bit, but his wounds were healing visibly than me, and I heard well-played heroes as I looked around to see who it was. It sounds like Annabeth, said Percy. She questioned, where the hell did you learn to fight like that? She appeared as the air glowed, clutching a Yankees baseball cap as though she had just removed it from her head. I just realized we were outplayed and outsmarted. But Percy said, I said, you set me up. You sent Luke around the flank and placed me here because you knew Claire would pursue me. You had everything worked out. Annabeth gave a shrug. I informed you. Athena has a plan, always and forever. A scheme to have me crushed. I arrived as quickly as I could. I wanted to leap right in, but she shrugged. You didn't require assistance. Then she saw my injured arm. How did you accomplish that? Cut the sword, I said. What are your thoughts? No. The cut was from a sword. Take a look. There was no more blood. There was a long, white scratch where the massive cut had been, and even that was disappearing. It changed into a tiny scar and vanished as I stared. I said, I don't get it. Annabeth was pondering. The turning of the gears was practically visible to me. Step out of the water, Percy, she urged, glancing first at my feet and then at Clarice's splintered spear. What? Just get it done. As soon as I emerged from the water, I was exhausted. Once more, my arms became numb. I got over my adrenaline surge. I nearly toppled over, but I was held up by Annabeth. She swore, oh sticks. This is not good. I didn't wish to, I thought Zeus would be the one. I realized who Percy's father was, one of the big three, and why his wounds healed in the lake, or specifically, water. The only god I could think of was water. Before I said anything, I heard that canine growl again, but much closer than before. A howl ripped through the forest. The cheering of the campers abruptly stopped. It was only afterward that I realized how well I understood Chiron's cry in ancient Greek, be ready. I bow. Annabeth pulled out her sword. A black hound the size of a rhino, with lava-red eyes and dagger-like fangs, was perched on the rocks directly above us. No, it was looking straight at Percy. The only one to move was Annabeth, who shouted, Percy, run! As Percy ran, so did the hound as it leaped over many of the campers including Annabeth, and beelined straight for Percy. I summoned Heartpiercer and without hesitation, stabbed the hound right before it attacked Percy, protecting him. With a gloomy expression on his face and a bow in his hand, Chiron galloped up beside us. The immortals, said Annabeth. That is a Fields of Punishment hellhound. They shouldn't, therefore they don't. It was summoned, Chiron remarked. A person within the camp. Luke arrived, his moment of glory gone, the banner in his grasp forgotten. Clarice said, Percy is to blame for everything. It was called forth by Percy. Chiron told her to keep silent. We saw the hellhound's body dissolve into the darkness and seep into the earth until it vanished. You're injured, Annabeth informed me. Percy, hurry up and get in the water. I'm all right. No, she answered, you're not. Look at this, Chiron. I was too exhausted to debate. The entire camp gathered around me as I retreated into the creek. I felt better immediately. The cuts on my chest were starting to close. A few of the campers let out a gasp. I tried to apologize as I continued, look, I don't know why. I apologize. However, they weren't observing the healing of my wounds. They had their eyes fixed on something over my head. Annabeth pointed and said, Percy? I looked up and saw a hologram of a trident proving why Percy was the way he was. I looked up at the sky and thought to myself, if you are there, whoever my father is, can you also claim me? Percy POV. Your dad, Annabeth whispered. This is not good at all. It's decided, Chiron declared. Campers began kneeling all around me, including in the Ares cabin, but they didn't appear to be pleased about it. My dad? I asked, utterly confused. Chiron said, Poseidon? Father of horses, Stormbringer, Earthshaker. Salutations to the son of the sea god, Perseus Jackson. Some time later. The campfire crackled beneath a canopy of stars, casting a warm glow over the gathered campers. Everyone sat in a circle, murmuring about the capture the flag game and the new kid who single-handedly outmaneuvered 3 Ares campers. Issei sat near the edge of the circle, bandages around his ribs, bruises blooming along his arms. He stirred his dinner quietly, head lowered. He wasn't used to attention, and definitely not from this many demigods. A few Aphrodite campers were already glancing his way, whispering and giggling. Some of the Aries kids just glared. Even Clarice looked confused, half annoyed, half curious. "You're pretty scrappy for a nobody," she muttered earlier. Issei hadn't known what to say. Now he just poked at his food, quietly wondering, what if I never get claimed? What if I don't belong here either? "Issei, thanks for protecting," said Percy. "Me and him were roasting some marshmallows over the campfire with some of the campers from all the cabins." "It's okay, Percy, we are friends, aren't we?" Percy nodded. "If you don't mind, do you want to tag along to Poseidon's cabin? We can talk about today?" "Sure, I don't mind," said Issei as he was ready to get up. The campfire turned pink. Not just pink, rose gold, brilliant and shimmering. Sparks rose like petals, drifting up into the stars. The entire camp fell silent. Even the Apollo kids stopped mid-joke. Everyone turned. A soft breeze passed through the clearing, carrying a scent of blooming roses and sea salt, as if someone had just walked by wearing expensive perfume and sunlight. Issei's body froze. He felt heat rising in his chest, not like a flame, but like something warm, like affection, like someone was smiling just for him. Above his head, light flared, and a symbol appeared in the air, glowing with soft beauty, a rose wrapped in a golden ribbon, the unmistakable mark of Aphrodite. Gasps rippled through the campers. "No way. Aphrodite? He just beat Aries kids with style. Of course it's Aphrodite." Issei looked up, wide-eyed, stunned. "Wait. Me?" Then he heard it, not with his ears, but inside his heart, a voice like silk and starlight. "My brave little fire. Love isn't just beauty, it's passion, courage, and chaos. And you are mine." His eyes shimmered faintly. His pulse quickened. Something inside him felt clearer now, more whole. A few Aphrodite kids whooped and clapped. "Finally! We got someone who can actually fight." Aries campers looked somewhere between offended and intrigued. Clarice just muttered, "TCH, pretty boy." But Issei didn't care. For once, he didn't feel lost. He felt claimed, not just by a god, but by purpose. Chiron stepped forward, his voice warm. "Welcome, Issei, son of Aphrodite." Next day, I moved into Aphrodite's cabin number 10, while Percy moved into Poseidon's cabin number 3. The inside of cabin 10 was glowing with soft lamplight, the air filled with the scent of roses, vanilla, and warm candle wax. It was like stepping into a mix of a fashion studio, dream spa, and royal bedroom. Issei stood awkwardly near the doorway, still in his bandages, holding his duffel bag like it might protect him. A tall, graceful girl with a messy bun and eyes like smoky quartz looked up from her vanity. "Oh, you're him," she said, smirking. Yeah? Sorry," Issei muttered. She walked over and gently took his bag. "Don't apologize. We've been waiting for someone who doesn't just care about mirror angles. You fought 3 Aries kids and didn't even chip a nail? Iconic." Another camper added, "And you actually use crimson in your battle gear? Aphrodite would be proud." Before he knew it, they were fixing up a bed for him, embroidered with red and gold sheets, little dragons stitched into the pillows as a nod to his aesthetic. They even gave him a mirror edged in flames. One of the younger Aphrodite boys offered him some fancy healing balm infused with nymph nectar and olive oil. "Don't ask where I got it." Issei smiled, small, but genuine. For the first time since arriving at camp, he didn't feel like a background extra. At breakfast the next morning, cabin 10 rolled in like a parade, and Issei, in clean crimson camp gear, freshly bandaged. The rest of the campers went silent. A Hermes girl whispered, "Did they give him a makeover?" "No," another said. "He wasn't that pretty yesterday." "Shut up," someone from Athena muttered. "He earned it." Clarice grunted from the Aries table. "I still want a rematch." Issei looked around, self-conscious, but tried to keep walking straight. Then a younger Demeter camper called out, "Hey, Issei! You were awesome last night." He blinked. "Thanks." Orion gave him a quick salute with a spoon. "Nice chain work, Crimson Kid." Issei smiled again. He still didn't know where he belonged in the world, but right now, Camp Half-Blood didn't seem so bad. Then I saw Percy having a one-on-one with Luke in sword fighting, so he waved at Orion to join him. When I got closer to them, I heard Luke say he assured us that while we worked with swords and fiery torches, you're going to need all the training you can get. Let's try the Viper beheading attack once again now. 50 more times. After training me, Percy and Orion were talking on the port near the lake. As Percy started to say that he didn't like being in Poseidon's cabin all alone, and how other campers were kind of staying away from him. Then Orion told us, or specifically Percy, "Hey Percy, have you read the newspaper?" Percy nodded no as Orion reached into his back pocket and pulled out a newspaper which read, "Boy and mother still missing after freak car accident." By Eileen Smythe. 1 week after their unexplained abduction, Sally Jackson and her son Percy are still unaccounted for. Last Saturday, the family's severely burned 1978 Camaro was found on a Long Island North road, its front axle damaged and roof torn off. Before exploding, the car had flipped and slid for a few hundred feet. The mother and boy had taken a quick, unexplained trip to Montauk for a weekend getaway. There were no other indications of the missing Jacksons, although there were faint blood stains in the vehicle and close to the accident site. Around the time of the tragedy, locals in the rural region said they saw nothing out of the ordinary. According to Ms. Jackson's husband, Gabe Agliano, his stepson, Percy Jackson, is a disturbed youngster who has previously displayed violent tendencies and been expelled from multiple boarding schools. Although they have not ruled out foul play, police would not say if son Percy is a suspect in his mother's abduction. Here are some current photos of Percy and Sally Jackson. Police ask that anyone with information contact the following Crime Stoppers hotline, which is toll-free. In black marker, the phone number was circled. After reading the paper, Percy threw away the newspaper and looked at us and said, "I don't want to think about that now, listen to this bad dream I had." I was a bit sad by this because I felt bad for my friend. Orion said, "Percy, what was your dream?" Trying to change the subject. In a storm, I was sprinting along the shore. I had a city behind me this time. Not in New York. The sprawl was different, with low slopes, palm trees, and houses spaced wider apart. 2 men were fighting about 100 yards down the surf. They had long hair, beards, and muscles, resembling TV wrestlers. Both were dressed in flowing Greek tunics, one with a green trim and the other in blue. Every time they made contact, lightning flashed, the sky darkened, and the wind increased. They fought, kicked, and headbutted. I had to put an end to them. I had no idea why. However, the wind drove me back more and more the harder I ran, until I was just running in place with my heels digging pointlessly in the sand. I heard the blue-robed one shouting, "Give it back!" to the green-robed one over the thunder of the storm. "Return it!" Similar to a kindergartner squabbling over a toy. "Damn, were they like Mexican wrestlers or WWE wrestlers," said Orion. "More like Mexicans," said Percy while laughing a bit. After laughing for a bit, we could hear hoofs stomping as Grover ran over to us and said, "Mr. D wants to see you too." "Why?" said Percy. "He wants to kill, I'd better let him tell you." We were a bit nervous, but we went either way as Orion didn't want to join us. Percy asked Grover about the huge storm that was circling the camp. Grover said not to worry, as it is going to pass around us. I wasn't so sure of it, and I didn't think the other campers were either, as everybody looked scared. Grover, me, and Percy approached the big house's front porch. Just like on my first day, Dionysus was sitting at the pinnacle table with his Diet Coke and his Hawaiian shirt with stripes that resembled tigers. Chiron sat in his makeshift wheelchair across the table. 2 sets of cards hovering in midair served as their invisible opponents. Mr. D said, well, without raising his gaze. "Our tiny stars." We waited. "Bring yourself closer," Mr. D urged. "And just because old Barnacle-beard is your father doesn't mean that I will bow down to you, mortal." Across the skies flashed a net of lightning. The house's windows trembled with thunder. Dionysus said blah blah blah. Chiron pretended that he was interested in his pinnacle deck. Grover's hoofs clomped back and forth as he cowered against the railing. Dionysus declared, "I would make your molecules burst into flames if I had my way. We would get rid of a lot of hassle by sweeping away the ashes." However, Chiron appears to believe that doing so would go against my goal of protecting you young brats from danger at this cursed camp. "Mr. D, spontaneous combustion is a type of harm," Chiron added. "That's absurd," Dionysus remarked. "The boy wouldn't have any emotions." "I have, however, committed to self-control. Instead, I'm considering transforming you into a dolphin and returning you to your father." "Oh, okay," Dionysus conceded. "There is an additional choice. But it's incredibly stupid." The cards of the invisible players fell to the table as Dionysus stood up. "I'm leaving for the emergency meeting at Olympus. I'll transform the boy into an Atlantic bottlenose if he's still here when I return. Do you get it? And if you're intelligent, Persis Jackson, you'll recognize that's a far better option than what Chiron feels you have to do. Dionysus grabbed a playing card and bent it into a rectangular piece of plastic. A credit card? No. A pass for security. His fingers the air seems to bend and fold. He became into a hologram, then a wind, and finally vanished, leaving behind only the aroma of freshly squeezed grapes. Chiron gave me a smile, but his expression was tight and weary. Please sit, Percy. Grover and Issei, too. Chiron asked us what we made of Hellhound. Percy answered first and said it scared me if Issei didn't protect me and stabbed the Hellhound, I would be dead. You're going to be facing worse than a Hellhound after you are done with what, said Percy. Your quest, naturally. Are you going to accept it? Percy looked at Grover, who had his fingers crossed. You haven't told me what it is yet, sir, Percy remarked. Chiron winced. Well, the details are the difficult part. The valley was filled with thunder. At this point, the storm clouds had approached the beach's edge. I could see that the sea and the sky were both boiling. Zeus and Poseidon, I said. Aren't they squabbling over something valuable, something that was stolen? How did you know, said Cryon. Percy's answer was, since Christmas, the weather has been strange, as if the sky and the water are at odds. After that, when I spoke with Annabeth, she mentioned that she had heard of a theft. Additionally, these nightmares have also been occurring to me. I was aware of it, Grover remarked. Satyr, keep quiet, Chiron commanded. But it's his mission. Grover's eyes gleamed with anticipation. It has to be. Only the Oracle can make that determination. Chiron ran his hand over his brittle beard. Nevertheless, you are right, Percy. This is the worst argument your father and Zeus have had in ages. A precious item that was stolen is the source of their argument. Specifically, a lightning bolt. I chuckled uneasily. What? This should not be taken lightly, Chiron said. I'm not referring to a zigzag coated in tinfoil that you could see in a play from second grade. I mean a 2-foot-long cylinder of premium heavenly bronze with god-level explosives capped on both ends. Oh, was all I could say. Zeus's master bolt, Chiron murmured, growing agitated. The emblem of his strength, which serves as the model for all other lightning bolts. The master bolt, which has enough force to make mortal hydrogen bombs appear like firecrackers, was the first weapon created by the Cyclopes for the war against the Titans. It was the bolt that tore the top off Mount Etna and threw Kronos from his throne. And it's not there? Said Percy. Stolen, Chiron said. By who? By whom, Chiron corrected. Once a teacher, always a teacher. By you? My mouth fell open. That's what Zeus believes, at least. Chiron raised a hand. Zeus and Poseidon argued at the final meeting of the gods on the winter solstice. The typical nonsense, air disasters are more spectacular than sea disasters, Mother Rhea always liked you best, etc. Zeus later discovered that his master bolt had been stolen from the throne room right in front of him. He blamed Poseidon right away. Now, according to the oldest of divine precepts, a deity cannot directly seize another god's sign of authority. Zeus, however, thinks your father persuaded a human hero to accept it. But I didn't. Have patience and pay attention, kid, Chiron replied. Zeus is justified in his suspicions. Because the Cyclopes' forges are submerged beneath the sea, Poseidon has some control over the people who create his brother's lightning. Zeus thinks Poseidon has stolen the master bolt, and is now surreptitiously assisting the Cyclopes in amassing a collection of illicit replicas that may be used to depose Zeus. Zeus was just uncertain about which hero Poseidon had used to steal the bolt. Poseidon has now publicly declared you to be his son. You spent the winter holidays in New York. You might have entered Olympus covertly with ease. Zeus thinks he's located his thief. However, I haven't even visited Olympus. Zeus is insane. Grover and Chiron looked anxiously up at the sky. As Grover had promised, the clouds didn't appear to be lifting around us. They were enclosing us like a coffin lid as they rolled directly across our valley. Poseidon is required by Zeus to return the bolt by the summer solstice. That is 10 days from today, on June 21st. On the same day, Poseidon demands an apology for being referred to as a thief. I thought that Hera, Demeter, or Hestia would use diplomacy to help the two brothers see things more clearly. But Zeus is angry now that you're here. Neither of the gods will back down now. War will break out unless someone steps in and finds the master bolt, and returns it to Zeus before the solstice. And Percy, are you aware of what a full-fledged war would entail? Wrong? I speculated. Consider a chaotic environment. Nature is in conflict with itself. The Olympians had to pick between Zeus and Poseidon. Destruction. Bloodshed. Millions have died. Western society has become such a vast battlefield that the Trojan War would have seemed like a water balloon fight. Bad, I said again. And Zeus's wrath would be felt first by you, Percy Jackson. Rain began to fall. Volleyball players paused their match and gazed up at the sky in startled silence. This storm has come to Half-Blood Hill because of me. I was the reason Zeus was punishing the entire camp. I was enraged. I responded, so I have to find the stupid bolt. And give it back to Zeus. Chiron remarked, what better peace offering than having the son of Poseidon return Zeus's property? Where is it if Poseidon doesn't have it? I think I know. Chiron had a somber face. A portion of a prophecy I received years ago. Well, now I understand some of the lines. But you have to formally start the quest before I can elaborate. You have to ask the oracle for advice. As me, Percy and Grover left for the oracle. Issei POV. Issei's inner thoughts. Who would steal Zeus' bolt and risk a full-scale war between Poseidon and Zeus for what reason? Percy POV. Why can't you tell me the bolt's location in advance? Because you wouldn't be able to take on the challenge if I did. I took a swallow. Good reason. So you agree? Grover gave me a supportive nod as I glanced at him. Simple for him. Zeus intended for me to be killed. Okay, I replied. It's preferable to being transformed into a dolphin. Chiron responded, then it's time you sought advice from the oracle. Percy Jackson, go to the attic upstairs. We shall continue our conversation when you return, if you are still sane. The stairs led to a green trapdoor at the top of 4 floors. I tugged on the rope. A wooden ladder clattered into place as the door swung down. The warm air from above had a fragrance that reminded me of biology class, together with decaying wood and mildew, reptiles, and the scent of serpents. I climbed while holding my breath. Issei POV. As I was following Percy and Grover up into the attic. When I reached into the attic, it was full Greek hero junk everywhere, cobweb-covered armor stands, rust-pitted shields that had once been dazzling, and old leather steamer trunks plastered with decals that read Ithaca, Circe's Isle, and Land of the Amazons. Glass jars containing pickled items, like severed hairy claws, enormous yellow eyeballs, and other monster parts, were arranged on a single long table. On the wall was a dusty trophy that resembled the head of a gigantic snake, complete with horns and shark teeth. Hydra Head No. 1, Woodstock, New York, 1969 was written on the plaque. The most gory memento of all was a mummy, which was perched on a wooden tripod stool beside the window. It was a human female body that had shriveled to a husk, not the kind that was clothed in cloth. She accessorized her long black hair with a headband, numerous beaded necklaces, and a tie-dyed sundress. Her eyes were glassy white slits, as if the original eyes had been replaced with marbles. She had been dead for a very long period. Her face was thin and leathery over her head. I got chills just looking at her. And it was prior to her opening her mouth and sitting up on her stool. The mummy's mouth released a green mist that hissed like 20,000 snakes, and coiling over the floor in thick strands. In my attempt to reach the trapdoor, I tripped and fell, but it slammed shut. The voice said, I am the spirit of Delphi, speaker of the prophecies of Phoebus Apollo, slayer of the mighty Python, as it snaked into one ear and wound itself around my brain. Ask, seek, and approach. Did you hear that? I asked Percy. Percy nodded and said in courageous tone, what is my destiny? The mist gathered directly in front of me and around the table containing the pickled monster part jars as it swirled thicker. All of a sudden, 4 men were playing cards while seated around the table. They showed their faces. Smelly Gabe and his friends are there. Who is Smelly Gabe? I asked Percy. My stepfather, he responded. I got the feeling I shouldn't intrude anymore. Percy POV. My fists clenched, though I knew this poker party couldn't be real. It was an illusion made out of mist. Gabe turned toward me and spoke in the rasping voice of the oracle. You shall go west, and face the god who has turned. His buddy on the right looked up and said in the same voice, you shall find what was stolen, and see it safely returned. The guy on the left threw in 2 poker chips, then said, you shall be betrayed by one who calls you a friend. Finally, Eddie, our building super, delivered the worst line of all, and you shall fail to save what matters most, in the end. #. The forms started to fade. I shouted out, wait. As the mist receded, coiling into a massive green serpent, and crawling back into the mummy's mouth. At first, I was too astonished to speak. What are you saying? Which friend? What am I not going to save? The mist snake's tail vanished inside the mummy's mouth. Back against the wall, she leaned. As though it hadn't been open in a century, her mouth shut tightly. Once more, the attic was quiet, deserted, and just a room filled with souvenirs. I had the impression that I wouldn't learn anything more if I remained here until I had cobwebs as well. I had finished my audience with the oracle. Issei POV. Before leaving the attic, I had a weird feeling that the oracle was looking right at me. When I squinted my eyes, I swear I saw a faint green glow in the oracle's eyes. All right? Percy was questioned by Chiron. I sank into one of the pinnacle table's chairs. I will get back what was stolen, said she vowed. Grover eagerly chewed on the remnants of a Diet Coke can while seated forward. That's fantastic. Grover, why did you leave when green mist started to come out? I asked. Grover looked at me and said I got scared. Fair enough. What did the oracle say exactly? Asked Cryan to Percy. Percy POV. This is significant. The reptilian voice was still tickling my ears. I would go west and confront a deity who had turned, she declared. I would recover the stolen item and ensure its safe return. I was aware of it, Grover remarked. Chiron didn't appear content. Is there anything else? I was reluctant to inform him. What kind of buddy would turn on me? Not that many were mine. When I didn't say that, Issei said quietly, and I was kind of scared. If Issei turned on me or even Orion, I wouldn't be able to protect myself from those two. As that was I said no, that's all. Exactly at that moment, I heard a demonic scream enough to reach down into my spine. Cryan put up his fist. He looked as if he was ready to fight as the doors swung open, and looking at the mummified figure of the oracle, Issei jumped out of the chair and looked terrified. The oracle looked at Issei and said while pointing at him. #When dragon's flame meets golden light, the path shall wake beneath the night. 3 trials past, the stars shall bend, where sun once ruled and maps now end. But silence kept or truth denied, shall burn the world the gods can't find. #. We were shocked, to say the least. Grover passed out. Does she give out double quests often? Asked Issei. Chiron goes silent as the oracle goes back to the attic. I questioned Chiron further by asking, questions Chiron, what does this mean? Chiron motions his hands as if to say come closer. And Issei, I go closer as Chiron puts his hands on our shoulders, and first he says is don't tell anyone. He looks at me and Percy. Be aware that the oracle frequently uses terms with 2 meanings. Avoid obsessing over them. Until things happen, the truth is not always evident. I had the impression that he was attempting to cheer me up because he knew I was suppressing something negative. All right, I responded, eager to shift the subject. So, where should I go? Who is this Western god? Think, Percy, Chiron murmured. Who benefits if Zeus and Poseidon undermine one another in a conflict? Who else would like to take over? I speculated. Indeed, quiet. A resentful person who has been dissatisfied with his situation since the globe was split up ages ago, whose kingdom would become more powerful as millions of people perished. Someone who despises his brothers because they had him take a pledge to refrain from having any more children, which they have now broken. I reflected on my nightmares and the malevolent voice that had come from beneath the earth. Hades. Chiron gave a nod. The only possibility is the Lord of the Dead. As he heard Grover wake up, hold up, a fury pursued Percy, Chiron reminded him. She attempted to kill the young man after observing him until she was certain of who he was. Hades is the only lord to whom the Furies submit. Grover objected, yes, but Hades hates all heroes. Especially if he has discovered that Percy is Poseidon's son. Chiron went on, a hellhound fled into the forest. It had to be called by someone inside the camp because those could only be called from the fields of punishment. Here, Hades must have a spy. He must have thought Poseidon would try to clear his name by using Percy. Before beginning the task, Hades would really like to murder this young half-blood. As for young Haidu, Issei POV. The sun once ruled is all I think of, that is the Sahara Desert in Africa. How was my response? I have to go to Africa, I said while screaming, why won't I? I came here a few days ago, and they expect me to go to Africa and for what? Grover shuddered. He had taken to consuming pinnacle cards as if they were potato chips. We need Aram and her ship Argo, said Chiron. You are lucky if you didn't have Aram. You would have to travel in Zeus territory for a long time to get there. Let me clarify this, Percy remarked. I'm meant to face the Lord of the Dead in the underworld. Check, Chiron said. Find the universe's most potent weapon. Verify. And return it to Olympus in 10 days, before the summer solstice. That's roughly correct. Now let me clarify, I said. I have to go to Africa and do trials of blood and war. Yes, said Chiron. And have to find 3 keys to awaken something that the gods forgot, said yes, Chiron. Damn was all I could say. Percy looked over at Chiron. So, where are we going? The Oracle just instructed us to head west. The underworld's entrance is always located toward the west. It changes with age, much like Olympus. Of course, it is in America at the moment. Where? Chiron appeared taken aback. I assumed that would be clear enough. Los Angeles is where the underworld's entrance is located. Oh, that's just amazing. We can't even take a plane there, can we, since it's in Zeus' domain? Chiron nodded. Lightning crackled overhead. There was a boom of thunder. Percy answered, determined not to glance at the storm. Okay. I'll go overland then. That's correct, Chiron remarked. You may have two pals. One is Grover. If you accept her assistance, the other has already offered to aid. I pretended to be surprised and said, gee, who else would be foolish enough to sign up for such a quest? Behind Chiron, the air glistened. Putting her Yankees cap in her back pocket, Annabeth emerged. Seaweed Brain, I've been waiting a long time for a quest, said Annabeth. I'm the best person to keep you from messing up if you're going to save the world, even though Athena doesn't like Poseidon. And for you, young Haidu, who would you choose? You already have Aram? Asked Cryon, looking at me. I choose Orion, I said with full confidence. I mean, if he is up for it, I don't know if he will follow or not. Great, Chiron remarked. We can drive you all the way to Manhattan's bus station this afternoon. You are on your own after that. There was a burst of lightning. The meadows, which were never expected to see severe weather, were drenched in rain. There's no time to waste, Chiron declared. I think it's time for everyone to pack. As I went to the volleyball area where Orion was. Hey, Issei, what's up, man? He asked. I am sorry to do this to you, but would you like to go on a quest with me? Orion was shocked, and so were the other campers, before excitedly screaming hell yeah as all other Apollo cabin campers gathered around. Later that day I sent a flare to Aram and Deborah so we can meet up. Evening that day. Orion and Issei see a huge ship pulling up.